And simulation theorists are simply those who are using the idea of a higher power or simulation or some AI to explain the correspondences between what's happening in the news and what's happening in entertainment. And for decades now, truthers have been under the misapprehension that the coincidences that we see cannot be explained, that man couldn't possibly do it. Man can fake wars, man can fake history, man can fake dinosaurs and moon landings, but for some reason isn't capable of synchronizing entertainment propaganda with information propaganda. See, if you just look at the entertainment and the news as two streams of propaganda coming from the same source, it all makes sense. What we're really talking about here is the co-opting of all of the major entertainment platforms by world government. That it's already happened. It's water under the fridge. It's not coming. The New World Order is already here in that sense. We are in a Truman Show, provably. And the prevailing explanation for what we see is that it's nothing. It's just a coincidence. You're crazy. Or it's a higher power. And I'm really fighting against this notion that it's inexplicable, that we don't know what causes it, because we know very well, as we have been documenting it. And so let's go ahead and look at this graphic that I had made just to kind of illustrate what I'm trying to convey with my words. This is a ChatGPT created graphic. You have two individuals talking. One of them has a tinfoil hat, and he says, mystical synchronicity, simulationist matrix, collective unconscious energy wave, or quantum pattern, revelation of the method, black magic, occultism, and karma. We live in a video game, and we can't know anything for sure. The other guy says, no, it's just propaganda. So what is it? Why is it that we can consistently point out that the movies are going to happen in real life, or at least aspects of them, that the movies are somehow preparing us for psyops or giving us a frame of reference to make us more susceptible for them? Like, this is not a stretch. This is formulaic, in fact. But until we started noting concurrent programming and how it's systemic, it's formulaic, it's intrinsic to what media actually is, we didn't really have the proper explanation. We are still up in the air. Well, maybe this is just like some truthers will say, they have to tell us. They're mocking us because they're evil. Or by telling us, we consent to the bad things. None of that really holds water. None of those explanations make sense. Not when you start recognizing the prevalence of concurrent programming as distinct from predictive. We're talking real time. So what is the problem with the real-time alignments? The problem is it presupposes foreknowledge, not necessarily by every actor, by every stagehand. The directors, sure. The directors would fall into the category, the high security clearance having script writers on the world stage, what I call Meta-scriptors. But if you just get rid of predictive programming for a moment, and let's just look at what it means here. So I have a list of movies, and this is just off the top of my head. It just took me 5 minutes to put this together with the help of Perplexity. But this kind of illustrates what I'm saying. Because if your premise is that the media/news alignments are the result of something higher than man, if you're leaning on that, then this higher than man thing must have some kind of agenda with taking guns and demonizing Trump and moving us into a society that worships Gaia over traditional religion. Like, it has a political bent. God's a progressive, apparently. The simulation is a liberal progressive. It's either that or this is all propaganda. So let me list these really quick. TV shows and movies with eerie real world parallels I took this list and I said, these movies were all talked about in the media because of how they, quote, eerily mirrored what was happening at the same time. So this isn't just me talking. These have all been noted by the media. Stranger Things season 4, Uvalde, Texas school shooting. Netflix added a warning to the season premiere due to its proximity to the Uvalde tragedy because they had a scene with kids getting killed. And that's just scratching the surface. You could also connect some other aspects of it to the shooting at the Tops store out there where the white nationalist inspired by Discord shot up a black supermarket. NBC's FBI season finale was pulled from the broadcast. They actually didn't play it. NBC FBI season finale. Why? Because the storyline basically happened in Uvalde, including somebody without a warrant, like it were both these instances. You had one guy said in the movie, in this NBC FBI show, he wasn't going to wait for a warrant. He was just going to go investigate this kid and stop a school shooting. So he did. He broke the rules, but he saved lives. But in Uvalde, the police were really slow to go in, and the shooter was stopped by an off-duty Border Patrol agent. So there's kind of this parallel. But again, these two shows were canceled or noted this event. Waco, American Apocalypse. The release of the Waco documentary coincided with Trump launching his 2024 campaign in Waco, a site with deep political and historical resonance. House of the Dragon, Roe v. Wade leak, and abortion rights debate. And as I said earlier, I put this on TV. It was HBO, Game of Thrones, this House of the Dragon, which I haven't even watched. I turned it off after this. I turned it on, and the opening scene is the queen dying in childbirth because she had no bodily autonomy, and they needed that son, the male child, at the expense of her life, because the most powerful woman is still just but a broodmare for the state. They were communicating this message graphically to the people who would have been enraged about Roe v. Wade. So here's what it says. The show's graphic childbirth scene was described by creators as a commentary on reproductive rights, coinciding with the leak of the Supreme Court's draft opinion to overturn Roe v. Wade. So how do you explain that? Simulationists. If you are a simulationist, how do you explain HBO releasing a show that has a scene that seems like a comment on the Roe v. Wade leak, which hadn't even happened yet? Again, we're just scratching the surface. There are so many more just coming to mind looking at this. Leave the World Behind. The fact that Leave the World Behind was produced by the Obamas is a big tell. A White Noise, East Palestine, Ohio train derailment and chemical spill. The film depicts a train derailment and a toxic event, quote, eerily mirrored by a real-life disaster in East Palestine. And of course, extras from that movie had to be evacuated when it happened for real. The madness parallels to Musk, political chaos, Luigi, Laura Loomer, we've talked about. The Trump shooting. The attempted assassination of Trump was attended by multiple examples of real-time releases of movies like Beetlejuice, the cartoon series Batman Caped Crusader. You had Captain America, Brave New World the day before the trailer released, had the president getting shot at. They changed it because of the event that happened. The Boys, same thing. They put a warning on the season finale and changed the title of Assassination Run. Mickey 17 has a character who, like Trump, was shot while giving a xenophobic speech, something about colonizing a white planet. Bullet grazes his cheek, consciously designed to resemble Trump. I mean, with the Trump ones, you've got a handful of others. Speak No Evil. The arrest of Andrew Tate coincided with Speak No Evil. The film's villain was inspired by Andrew Tate. The movie's release coincided with his high-profile arrest, drawing attention again to the overlap between fiction and reality. So this is just 5 seconds of research. I've got much more. And all of these are nuanced. And another thing, too, is we're also correlating drills with entertainment, with events. But looking at this, how can you conclude that these are just coincidences? And these have been documented and observed going back many, many years. 9/11, chock full of these. There's a show called, I think it's a movie called 5 Feet Apart, about two immunocompromised lovers who have to stay 6 feet apart. Came out in 2019. We have so many examples of this. So the explanation, the best explanation we have, is that these are related to these psyops. Same creators. I'd call it the psyop entertainment complex, the same agenda. So in other words, the agenda behind the movies is to get us to go along with the news media's agendas, which are in fact the government's plans for us. And there's only one government. I think we can just refer to it as the government. If you think there's multiple governments and different space agencies and the different countries are all in space and they're not all collaborating in a big hoax, I mean, that's just naive in 2025. What else are they lying about that they all know to be a hoax? Nukes? I mean, you think we're the only ones who know nukes are fake? There's a certain level, a certain security clearance where they realize it's just a bluff. It's just a hypothetical. It's just a hyperstition, a God construct that keeps the masses in line and gets them to willingly give out all of their power and money and resources for safety. But we're going to continue to refine our research methodologies, especially with AI. And we're going to do a nuanced takedown of psyop after psyop. But the reason why I'm honing in on this is that the misinformation line, that these are all the result of glitches in the matrix, these explanations conceal the real cause and conceal the alignment between entertainment and news, which is a facet of what media is. It's the only conspiracy. I mean, Bigfoot's fake, aliens are fake, chemtrails are fake, all these different conspiracies, Epstein's Island, Diddy, these things are all just distractions from this. All of the conspiracies are distractions from the fakery. And the damage control line, I believe, is to get people who notice media fakery to think that reality is fake. Oh, the reason for all these weird coincidences is that we live in a video game. Okay, well, if they just got you to accept the premise that reality is fake to explain the news not making sense, then they have effectively induced something of a schizoid break from objective reality. And this think tank may be the only objectivist think tank on Earth. The objectivists were never pure objectivists because from the beginning, even Ayn Rand treated the media as objective, as real, with different people's opinions bouncing off of that. And I'm saying, no, you can't make that a fundamental assumption and starting point. You cannot, especially not now. I mean, it was never something you could do and remain objective. We live in a sea of subjectivity. HG says, so Katy Perry didn't really go to space. Well, I knew she was prepared for space fakery a long time ago, and she has had this repeated role of a conspiracy, kind of a debunker. She was the target of a conspiracy. Some believe she was John Benet Ramsey, all grown up. She's toyed with this stuff. Now she's going on tour, by the way. Dwayne Aubith says, predictive programming is simply conditioning. Cognitive programming, the mystical explanations get more convoluted and absurd. Yeah, I had some guy say, it's quantum entanglement, bro. Like quantum entanglement to explain why the Roe v. Wade leak coincides with HBO giving you these hardcore visuals, or why the movies have things that shock you so that you want to vote for gun control. These are propaganda narratives and messages planted into movies, and it is timed, and it is deliberately put there to get you to acquiesce to the various psyops. And this is not new. JFK assassination, they say, oh, Lee Harvey Oswald must have been influenced by Suddenly and the Manchurian Candidate. No, those movies put the story out there so that when the thing goes down, people have a frame of reference. It helps them. It helps the entertainment is like the sugar they put in the poison. which is the news media psyops, and it helps it go down. It makes it more believable. And many have noted coincidences or people making these comments where it was like a movie after 9/11. It was like Independence Day. Well, leading up to 9/11, how many movies did you see about terrorism, buildings falling from the sky? There were plenty. And if you look at these directors are repeatedly involved in films that forecast the future. It's a reoccurring theme. It's a pattern. Dinah Southar said, news media may have started with some real stories and reporters, but it's been funneled into well, it may have been, but it's always been centralized. But another thing to consider is that the worldview has always been monopolized, and the news media has always bounced off the consensus worldview. So the consensus worldview, which I'm not in, off-world stage, off the grid, I don't have to believe a lot of this stuff. I'm not ducking and covering. I don't care about space junk. I don't think it's real. I don't believe in a lot of the things that truthers believe in. Chemtrail. I don't exist in the universe where these things are real because I recognize that it's a fictional universe. We live on planet Netflix. Just because it's real on Netflix doesn't mean it's real out there. And that's how they operate. They operate by augmenting your simulation, your internal model of the world with lies. I take the subtractive view. The subtractive view is eliminate that which can't be verified. Don't overreact to headlines. Just because it's a headline doesn't mean it's true. Do you remember the drones? Does anybody remember the drones? The drones that were swarming the skies in New Jersey, and none of the drone sightings were drone sightings. They were all airplanes. But it was going viral until people got distracted by something else, which is the pattern. Oh yeah, they got distracted because the Epstein files were going to be released. That didn't happen, but they were distracted because the JFK files were being released, which didn't happen. And then the Diddy files didn't happen. So many nothing burgers. And the most interesting thing to come out in recent years about the JFK hoax is that 2 months before his assassination, he and Jackie filmed a home movie in which he was assassinated. They employed the assistance of Secret Service agents and Heinz 57 ketchup. And there's a movie out there, Vanity Fair talked about it, September 22nd, 1963, JFK filmed a home movie. Well, Jackie filmed it. He was the star, and he was killed in it. I mean, that's just, I think, something of a clue about how they were going into this thing with the spirit of this is fun. It's kind of I think they think it's a joke. But let's see here. Girl says, watch Christopher Nolan's The Prestige. Yeah, I did watch that one. And look, Christopher Nolan is a great example. If you look at his movies, like the Batman movies, how many times have those movies correlated with PSYOPs? We got the Boston bombing, Joker, Sarnev, the Joker. And then years later, Batman comes out, 3/4/2022, was it? And the day that came out, Joker, Sarnev's death penalty was reinstated. You have many correlations between Nolan's films and the school shootings. And then you have Nolan's films also having foreshadowing for 2020. Then you have foreshadowing for the nuke and his brother with Fallout. I mean, this is a consistent pattern where we've started to label certain directors as, quote, meta-scriptors. And it's intriguing to look at how they seem to be given these roles consistently. It's kind of an error to focus exclusively on Stanley Kubrick, even though 2001 Space Odyssey foreshadows 9/11. The Shining also foreshadows 9/11, not just Apollo 11. There are many clues throughout his movies about his involvement with the JFK assassination hoax. But the focus on Kubrick is often tied to this idea that he's some kind of a whistleblower, that he was an anomaly. And it's like, no, he's not an anomaly. The people who get high up enough in the pyramid are, at some level, drafted into this or conscripted into the world stage theater, which is all propaganda. And our approach of media here, looking at it as a unified system between the entertainment and the news and all the celebrity stuff. Looking at it this way, we make predictions. So I see there's this event where Trump he's on trial, he's in the courthouse, Robert De Niro's outside. Now, I've never taken a special interest in Robert De Niro, but I said there's no way he's out here truly Trump deranged. That if Robert De Niro is out here drawing attention to himself and using certain keywords, called Trump a destroyer, I said, watch, look through his movies. There's something in it. And it turns out that in the movie Machete, he plays a Trump-esque character who's giving a speech about immigration when he gets shot. What was Trump giving a speech about when he was shot? Oh, yeah, that's right. He was pointing at the sign, the immigration sign. And pointing at that sign was likely, by the way, an act of misdirection. So you're looking there when the shooting starts. It was a cue. When he raises his arm, that's when you do the gun sound effects. That's when we go into, I mean, the whole thing was obviously a magic trick. You know, Trump did a magic trick on 7/13/2024 and tricked the world. But, to my point here, in that movie, this character is very Trump-like, and he's played by Robert De Niro. So you have this association between Trump and De Niro, and he gets shot giving an identical speech. Interestingly, the shooter had his ear blown up right after. But when I saw that, I said, wait, this is strange. That's a pretty strong parallel. And then going deeper, we realized, okay, De Niro played Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver. Taxi Driver inspired Reagan's shooter, who also shot Brady with, and again, these are all intricate and there's layers to these things, but just on the face of it, De Niro inspired a presidential shooter, and that role, Travis Bickle, was the basis for the Joker, who shoots De Niro on TV. So you have, and of course, De Niro in Taxi Driver was an assassin. So you have this repeated theme of the assassin, the assassinated with De Niro. And again, this is just kind of scratching the surface, just pointing out that seeing that he was there, I said, watch, this is going to tie into something. And then what happened less than a month later? Trump gets shot. So I said, hey, look, we were just watching the Machete where this guy's giving a xenophobic speech and he gets shot, and look what happened to Trump. And then, of course, I mentioned earlier, Mark Ruffalo, who was born on JFK's death day, 11/22, is in a Trump-esque role in Mickey 17, talks about colonizing an all-white planet, and a bullet grazes his ear at some point in the movie. I haven't seen it yet. I'm going to go see it. So if you support this channel, you're paying for research, whether it's software, AI stuff, or movie tickets. It's all going to the cause. And I have a list of movies I have to catch up on, but Mickey 17 is one of them. And this all just underscores the point that if we weren't right about this, we wouldn't be able to predict which movies would contain so-called predictive programming. I watched the Netflix show The Madness because it was the #1 movie. And I said, watch what it contains. And I come out with a review. Class warfare, billionaire CEO that's obviously Musk influencing the election, left-wing, quote, Antifa with Uzis rising up, ghost gun assassin. All the things that I talked about came true, including this class warfare narrative. And it even gets deeper because we start looking at the correlation between the Joker character, class warfare, and Luigi. All of this stuff, again, is indicative of a pattern of overlapping themes in entertainment with things that are going to happen on the world stage. And they have used entertainment to turn Trump into a Caesar-like character. And this assassination theme goes so far back that the day before the Butler, Pennsylvania thing, we were talking about what was going to happen. We said, when's he going to get his head wound? How's the world going to react? Will this be a 9/11? Will MAGA rise up? We've been talking about this for some time. And on the day it happened, it was the discussion. One of our live streamers, chatters in the live stream, Isabel Ann, had talked about the location of a certain star, Algol, and how it would indicate head wound. And funnily enough, minutes later, it happened. So my point is, we were not surprised. And we weren't sitting there saying he's going to get it. We're sitting there, he's going to fake it. I don't operate under the presumption that they're going to do something for real. As it's axiomatic to say that the predictive programming only ever precedes fake events. And why do they do this? Some people are really insistent on knowing why before they agree it might be true. And I'm fine with that. We should always be asking these questions. There's got to be a rationale. But just because you can't fully articulate how a hoax was pulled off doesn't mean it's real. And just as we can categorically say all magic shows are fake, we can. There's not a magic show where they do real magic. Just because you can't figure out how the trick was performed doesn't make it real. And at this point, we can categorically call all major news events fake until proven real. And if it's real, it doesn't get the sensationalistic coverage. And fake news is real. They do fake news. We know this. And what happens to fake news day after day? This is the whole point of it. Day after day of faking news, it becomes, oh, look, history. Go pick up a history book and tell me what happened on 9/11. I guarantee if you look at a history book right now, it's going to say that 9/11 happened as reported on TV. And it might even make note of the conspiracy theorists, only to remark that they were wrong. But they are going to treat what was broadcast on news media as evidence, as just reality being broadcast. That news equals reality. News equals objectivity. And that is, again, the fundamental premise that everyone has wrong. So it means that in our lifetimes, since we've been observing, we have lived through the creation of a fake curated history. Because it's not just the big events, but what follows and the minor events that follow in the wake. All of these provably fake. The London bombing, 2005, was preceded by a BBC documentary. The BBC documentary was about terrorists bombing the subway. During the subway bombing, there were drills happening in the subway, in the exact subway tunnels where the bombings happened. And in the drills, they deployed simulated bombs. So how do you explain this? It's on TV, it's happening in drills, and it happens in real life. I recall the InfoWars coverage claiming it's a drill that went live, which was their go-to explanation. They said, oh, it was a drill, but then it went live. Alex Jones would throw that disinformation line out there. But what we're talking about are drills presented as real. It's really quite simple. And in order to get people to grasp the story right away, to go with the flow, to take sides, and to react predictably, they inundate you with additional programming through the venues of entertainment. Okay, so let's go through my minds.com. A lot going on. We talked about this yesterday. Making the Trump-Tony Soprano connection even deeper. How Tony Soprano paved the way for Donald Trump. This is the Vanity Fair article from 2016. But at the end of season 1, Tony Soprano survives an assassination attempt, shoots his ear, and he has to wear a bandage on his ear. One fascinating thing, look to track down. 1958 TV show, Western, a character named Trump moves into town, sells the public on the need for a wall. He's going to protect them from a cosmic threat. Only he can do it. So he's this demagogue snake oil salesman named Trump. And in 2016, CNN and other media outlets noticed, oh, this is weird. Trump was predicted 58 years ago. So this has already been noted as eerily coincidental. Cosmic threat, Space Force, build the wall. It's all pretty obvious. And of course, the guy, his name is Trump. But 8 years after that, after it was already noted for being prophetic, he gets arrested. I mean, think about it. In Trackdown, the Trump gets arrested. So the entirety of the predictive programming value in that movie, the events that it was foreshadowing, had not even been realized yet. So looking at it from this perspective, we can look back at various movies that have elements of foreshadowing of future fake events and look and see what else they foreshadow. A lot of people had jumped on this notion that Kubrick faked the moon landing because of The Shining. But no matter how many documentaries Jay Dyer and company make about it, they never talk about the other events inferred by that movie as much, if not more, than Apollo 11, namely 9/11. And I know I'm not wrong about this. We have, not only is there a pretty thorough analysis by Chartword about this, and I've talked about it before, but the follow-up to The Shining, Dr. Sleep, written by Stephen King, has a psychic baby, a baby-born psychic, this child who predicts has some kind of premonition about 9/11. And The Shining, of course, is about a psychic having visions of something. So it kind of makes sense of the scene where Danny is seeing the elevators and the blood and correlating that with the Twin Towers, or the throwing of the darts where the twins are. I mean, there are so many scenes in there where Kubrick had built like Manhattan in this one room, with the phone booth representing the bell tower, the twins representing the Twin Towers, Danny throwing the darts, Danny going down the hallway. The twins are there. He turns left. They're all cut up with an axe, like a fireman's axe. Very 9/11-y stuff, but it's intricate. But it's a pattern in all of his movies, and that's what I'm saying. Is that this is a formula. Let's fill their minds, their imaginations, when they're suggestible, when they're just being entertained with certain themes and ideas. You were introduced to Luigi Mangione in the form of the Joker in 2019. Luigi won your sympathy 6 years ago. Then he steps out on the world stage. People dress up like him, kill the rich. The Joker, his followers dressed up like him, and the whole movie's theme was kill the rich. Tomonoid 3 says Richard Donner is one of the track down directors, Omen, Superman, etc. Dwayne Obith says, if satellites are fake, why do we have emojis of them? Checkmate Flurfs. I don't dispute the existence of satellites. However, I dispute whether what is being advertised as coming from orbiting satellites is actually being carried out by Loon X under a different name. Look up Loon X for stratospheric balloons that provide internet connection, full coverage. It's just interesting that Loon X goes out of business as Starlink goes up, and they do the same thing. One does it with balloons that you change out every 6 months, and the other does it with these CubeSats and a lot of environmental damage and pollution and now space junk hitting airplanes and all this stuff. Shelley Duvall died 7/11, says Diana Southard. Right, she seemed like a really nice lady. I watched a lot of interviews. She was very open to talking to people, and you can find some interviews with her. Very interesting actress. I think she said that Kubrick actually terrified her, that she was scared. They really brought out legitimate fear for some of those scenes. A Newful says, Alex Jones, the final boss of controlled opposition. Yeah, one thing too. If you are echoing the perspectives of alt media, you are controlled opposition. If you're not getting paid, you're a propaganda mule. You're a mule saddled down with pounds of red pills that are all toxic misinformation. And I have no interest in being a propaganda mule. I'm not a red pillar. I don't pass the Q pipe around. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid at Alex Jonestown. I think the entire alternative media is the opposite side of the coin as mainstream. So for those who are new, and this is not an oversimplification, the general consensus worldview that is built upon our consensus agreed upon fake history, I call the mainstream mediation, MSM. This box contains the worldview that everybody believes in. But the conspiracy theorists think that the mainstream media's reportage is lying, so they add on to it, but they don't subtract. So I call them MSM plus. They're a subset of the mainstream. And the conspiracy theorists, instead of challenging the premise established by every story, simply add on additional narratives. Oh, like Trump did get shot, but it was a second shooter. Or they let it happen. It was a lie hop. They let it happen on purpose. Or this thing did happen, but these guys did it. So they just add additional stuff like, oh, it did happen, but it was direct energy weapons. But they didn't verify that the body counts were real from the very beginning. So what separates us from truthers is that truthers assume that people die in psyops. They actually still believe that. And if you're still walking around with theatrical blood on your hands, you're just spreading propaganda. Nobody dies at these events. That's not a controversial statement. And if your contention is that they do die, then who? Where? What's your evidence? If your evidence is, I saw it on TV, sorry, that's not evidence. And the mainstream media's job is to meet the requisite burden of proof. The fact that they don't or they can't is not my problem. If they don't, I simply don't believe. If you do believe, then you at least have to admit that you're a believer, but you don't really know. And there's a qualitative difference here. You know, a lot of people believe in unicorns or Mandela effects, but it doesn't make them true. People believe that these events are real, but the deep state's doing it, or it's real as advertised. But these are mere beliefs. So one final point here, if you're in the MSM box, you're in a world of subjectivity. And the same event that's fake will be interpreted in two different ways. For example, helicopter crash, female pilot, or helicopter crash, black pilot. Left wing says this is caused by government deregulation and Trump. The right wing will say this is caused by DEI. And this is formulaic. So both sides agree it happened. They just disagree on the cause. And that's one of the main games here. If they can get you to take the reflexive anti-position, you're going to accept the false premise. You're going to react to the problem. That's not even a problem. So I take the position of MSM minus the subtractive view. I take all the unverifiables out of my assessment, and I don't operate on the premise that these things are real. It's called skepticism, suspension of judgment. Tim, in Truthers Village, they're asking why 4chan is down. Yeah, I'm so happy about this. 4chan got hacked. I'm going to find out who Q is, perhaps. That could happen. In fact, tonight, I'm going to go through and I'm going to drop my list of emails into whatever files they've leaked, and I'll have ChatGPT dig through there and see. If they dox Q, that would be great. Now, if you didn't know, the QAnon whole thing, the 4chan got shut down because of, well, it was the Christchurch shooting. It then became 8chan, 8kun. And one of the Q droppers is somebody that we know. So what I'm saying is that, Q might be 3 or 4 people who've dropped the posts, might have been several different people, but for sure we know one of them. And he's part of this George News outfit at the White House. And if his email address shows up, it's going to be searchable against the lawsuit that's public that will connect him to a number of other things. It's a pretty big story. The story being that in the White House press corps, you have a influential, popular QAnon promoter who's gone undetected for years. And he was the guy that hacked Hunter Biden's laptop. Ted Stryker, yeah, there is a Discord server. Just go to ips.monster for the new one. I deleted the previous one. We're going to go back into voice chats, and we do have to get back into panel discussions. But we're going to have some rules this time. The last Discord server was, I would say, co-opted with individuals with a religious agenda. I'll just leave it at that. And I'm not a religious person. And if you are, that's fine. But we don't bring up God when we talk about climate change, and we don't need to bring up God when we talk about media fakery. And I'm trying to break that habit of somehow putting these things in the same area, like these are relevant. Like, what does the Lord think about Sandy Hook? Like, let's just stick to the facts. What's up, Marcel? Good evening from Holland. By the way, this is the new format. It's not really different from your perspective. We don't have Godzilla, but other than that, as long as we're not buffering, I'm fine. If we do buffer, then I was wrong for blaming OBS, but I think we've been fine so far. So we've been talking about the widespread skepticism regarding the latest Blue Origin launch, and people like Azealia Banks calling it a hoax. I'm going to call it a hoax until I see Kate Perry singing It's a Wonderful World levitating in space. We're not going to get it. And many have noted that while they were in space, she had her face against the camera lens with her daisy. She wasn't even looking out the window. Like, imagine taking a trip like that and not even looking out the window. It's all just performative. And I hate to say it, but, we have to just be honest. Kate Perry is a top-tier Illuminati liar. She's in the club. And it's not a very big club. The other day I mentioned the 9/11, was it 9/11 syndrome or something? The 9/11 effect. It's called the 9/11 sign. So I found this article in the New York Times where they found this person who made all these claims about being in the towers, losing her friend, getting somebody's wedding ring. And I remember these stories just went so viral. In fact, let's look at this one. And I'm sure there's an agenda behind it. Like, why would they share this? Okay, so in a 9/11 survival tale, the pieces just don't fit. Tanya Head's story, shared over the years with reporters, students, friends, and visitors at Ground Zero, was a remarkable account of life and death. She survived the tower attacks, was badly burned. I think she almost lost her arm. She crawled through the chaos and carnage on the 78th floor. A dying man gave her a wedding ring for her to give to the widow. Very dramatic story. What I witnessed there, I will never forget. She told a gathering at a college in 2006, a lot of death and destruction, but I also saw hope. So she's out there on the circuits with her resume of being a victim in 9/11, and it turns out it was all fake. Kind of like that George Santos guy. George Santos claimed that his grandparents died in the Holocaust. His parents died in 9/11, and he died in Sandy Hook. And people just believed him. And I was like, wow, the more you lie, the higher you climb. And if you're a big enough liar, you go all the way up to space, like Kate Perry. How many of you were thinking they were going to blow that thing up just to make some ironic kind of DEI story for the right wing to use against everybody, like they have been doing with these helicopter crashes and plane crashes? It's just too good of a opportunity. And I wasn't the only one to suggest that it was possibly diabolical for Bezos to send his wife up. We're like, well, how is their relationship? Because this is some daredevil stuff. And one other thing, if I'm going into a capsule that's going to be flung up into space and might possibly tumble, and I'm going to be flying around the room with a bunch of people, I'm going to wear a helmet. I didn't see anybody wearing helmets. I know they don't want to mess up their hair, but it just seems to me that was potentially risky. Yeah, the wedding ring bit. But anyway, okay, so Miss Head had told all these people about it. But here we go. In recent days, through an associate, a social worker who was on the board of our survivors network, dug into it. And it says here, her relationship with Dave, one of the victims, was a fantasy. So the whole story breaks down. And they call this thing the 9/11 sign. And there were many people who were doing this. I've talked to many of them. I've lost track of how many callers would call in claiming that they knew somebody who knew somebody. What's up, X322? Thanks for joining. Marcel says, can space be called the bottomless pit of lies? Yeah, I look at space as a metaphor. They're not going to take us into outer space, but space is a metaphor representing the space between your ears, because it's about world view control. This is the world. This is what it looks like. This is our closed system. And once they've established that, they can build off of it. Like, now it's fragile. Now we threaten it. Now mankind is a tumor on the side of Mother Earth. I saw that, Diana. There are images. Jeff Bezos tripped and fell on his face. The man who fell to Earth. I was talking about how he relates to the man who fell to Earth. But yes, he tripped and fell on his face on the way around the capsule before it was opened from the inside and then closed so they could open it for the cameras with Bezos' special tool, because you can only open it from the outside. I mean, what a continuity error. What a goof. Such a scam. Space is a scam. Kate Perry didn't pull it off. And the hair, did you notice how lazy they are with the hair? I think they're not even using hairspray. They're not doing the Suni Williams treatment where they douse it with so much hairspray it stands up stiff. They're not using the CGI hair. No, they're just kind of barely blowing it with the dryer. The one who went up with Musk's rocket over Antarctica, her hair was just flat. It's like, what's going on? Do the private space agencies not have the same hairdresser that works for NASA? And I think the guy that does the hairdressing for all of the mass shooters is the same, because they all have the same ridiculous bowl cut, which again is likely a symbol. Okay, let's continue. Sean McGuire. Oh, this is interesting here. This is someone talking about the hero Luigi Mangione. We may get to that. When faking space goes horribly wrong. So if anybody here is still thinking that they are not lying about sending her to space, let me show you what we're talking about with the door. Because to me, I think this is conclusive evidence of fakery. Okay, when faking space goes terribly wrong, and this video is by Taboo Conspiracy.
Anyways, we're going to skip. Was that the women inside prematurely opened the capsule and the Blue Origin handler rushed over to the door to tell them to close it. Let's watch.
Oh my God, I saw the stars. I saw the curvature of the earth. You know, what's going to come out of her mouth, but really her heart.
And is that
okay? Watch. So if you're looking at the screen here, the capsule's on the ground. It just came down from space, perfectly level. It's surrounded by a bunch of vehicles, and you're supposed to believe that this door is sealed shut. So Jeff comes out with his little hammer tool to open it, but they open it up and like, is it ready yet? And like, I think it's Kate Perry. I was like, no, get back in there.
Jeff Bezos out there right by the capsule? Kind of hard to see.
Then about 2 minutes, 45 seconds later, Jeff Bezos goes up to the capsule with a special tool to unlock.
Wow, that's hard. That's very difficult to open. But it was very easy when they did it from the inside just a minute ago.
Oh. She didn't really close it again.
Then we can.
So there you have it. And on the last clip here, you can see her with the door open, peeking in before he ever touched it with his magic hammer. So how do you space believers explain this? Now, I know what this really is. This is the capsule. the capstone. It represents the pharaoh elite, the golden tip of Osiris's obelisk. This is religious pageantry. Space is a secular heaven. It's a heaven that the atheists will believe in. It's a concept of heaven and ideal and utopianism that I think is compatible with atheism and a scientific paradigm. And all the other religions, with their various versions of heaven and paradise, they all still believe in space. So it's very unifying. It's a heaven that atheists also believe in. Dwayne Arbith says, haha, interstellar bouncy castles. Well, that's kind of what I was thinking, is that the way they flew around inside of it, it looked like they were in one of these bouncy castles and they're not wearing helmets. But I'm sure there's going to be some explanation tomorrow. Like NASA they'll say, because here's what they do. The brainwashed, the Stockholm syndromed will lie to defend their captors. Like I'll say, oh, he's a liar. And they'll say, no. They just had to open it up and check and make sure everybody was okay. And then they just symbolically did it. Like they performatively broke the seals, but they already did it before the cameras were rolling. And they did this just to make sure everything was okay, cool. So you got a whole story to explain away the bullshit. Like, oh, self-brainwashing. It's like swallowing a Tide Pod of misinformation. Like, oh, I had some wrong think. Let me go ahead and correct my thinking. Let me add some cognitive dissonance. Let me see if the commenters have anything enlightening to say here. The frightening part of it is that the sheeple believe this is true. Founded Earth Brother says, wow, the door was floppy for a vacuum-proof life-saving device. But then again, tinfoil can withstand the vacuum on the moon. So why should this be any different? Andrew DM81 says, commercial planes that fly 30,000 feet have to have walls that are a foot thick to protect from the -7 Fahrenheit temperatures, but space capsules are as thin as an RV door. The only thing that's ever been to space is your imagination, says Not Janine 777. I concur. Let's see. Conspiracy says it's refraction. The ease with which the door opened from the inside reminds me of those plastic temporary toilets. Like if you step too hard, the door opens. Plane skins are thin and are made of aluminum. The problem would be different pressures. Anyway, I'm trying to find somebody to explain what we're seeing here. Don't forget the inverted Baphomet on their space suit patches. You know, this has made some mainstream news like Daily Mail, that their patches, sort of like the Space Force hat, look like Baphomet when you turn them upside down. It might just be Satan. I mean, Baphomet gets called out for a lot of this stuff, but Baphomet is not really a personage. It's just a symbol of man, beast, angel, an amalgamation, male, female, polarities all reconciled. But it's more like, I guess you would call it an icon. Whereas, you know, the devil, the goat, the satyr, the earth god has various representations. And it would be consistent, by the way. If we're talking about symbolism and syncretism, like Cernunnos and other horned gods, all the earth gods would be relevant here when we're talking about the obelisk, which represents, of course, Osiris. All right, continuing. They're all part of the 33 Club. True. MTW Seneca says, the comment section here is great, but not so great is a comment zone on Benny Johnson's show where only 20% say that it's fake. It does say we're waking up. It would have been 0 half a dozen years ago. Yeah, Benny Johnson is a mainstream alternative type. And you'll notice that their people are brainwashed. One of the things they all believe in is, this is also clever on behalf of the programmers. So the far right capitalist types who don't believe in environmentalism or communism or sustainability or climate change, they see the space program itself, the private space agencies, as a testament to the power of the free market. They see Musk as exemplifying free market principles. And look freedom and capitalism will take us to Mars. So they see it all as a win. But they don't know that the space program, which again, it's all mind programming, is how they condition capitalists to accept the notion that the ideal way to live is in a space gulag on Mars. Space communism. It's not luxury living. You're essentially a slave on some remote outpost. One-way ticket if you make it. But they somehow condition these people who believe in freedom and living according to, well, essentially putting, profit over people, profit over Gaia, getting them to go into spacesuits and live in a domed subterranean area because you won't be on the surface of Mars. So I think it's just intriguing how they've used the space program with its implicit acquiescence to environmentalism and the ideas of sustainability to the people who reject those notions. It's a Trojan horse. That rocket is a Trojan horse. And if you believe that the space program is progress, you've just accepted environmentalism. All right, there's quite a lot more here, more comments. Here we go. Here's the cope I was waiting for. The first time the door opened was a pre-open test opening. After it was proven successful, we were ready for the official and fully authorized actual door opening. Okay, I think he was being sarcastic. Blaze says, how people still believe this Disney show is beyond me. Well, it's a religion for the atheist. It gives them hope. And they are literally praying to an obelisk. Like, let me emphasize this point. This is a religious ceremony. It's religious pageantry first. It's going to space and Mars never. Like, its primary purpose is the one world view. This is the one world religion. So the rocket, the space program has given us our cosmography. And I'm not even saying the Earth is not a ball. In fact, funnily enough, I don't know what her point was. I think I even have it here. Let me go through my Twitter. Blair White posted something. Let me see if I can find it. Because people have been comparing her to Lauren Sanchez. And she was kind of trolling, but she said the Earth was flat. Back from space, the Earth is flat. Let me see if I can find that post. So many people are trolling this. And someone in the Discord or the Gilded had pointed out that it seems like it's only right-wingers or conspiracy theorists that are calling it fake. And this is not new. The flat Earth thing has only ever been right-wing conspiracy. It's not a liberal thing. The flat Earth thing has an intrinsic rejection of climate change, environmentalism. So here you have it. The mission patch does in fact have a satanic goat emblem. Make of that what you will. Tommy Borum says, look at the capsule. There's no scorch marks. They're on a sound stage. The capsule has no signs of having been through the atmosphere. Come on, be smart. Yeah, I don't even think that they dropped them off of an airplane and put their lives at risk. I think this is actually being filmed I think this is a simulation, and they do it all in a simulation indoors, and then they go outside where this thing's already on the ground. Mazel says Sky News calls it cringe. Good. See, that's progress in a way. But one of the reasons why look, Bezos, Musk, billionaires, rich people, capitalists, they kind of have it out for private space agencies. And one of the storylines I've been hearing for several years is that the billionaire with access to space, like Musk in particular, is destroying a system that affects the commons, that one individual can destroy something for all mankind. So Musk's space junk has been a theme. And even before Musk's space junk started falling, I said, watch. They're going to correlate X, disease X, and mind viruses or mind junk with space junk. And they're going to say Musk is a problem for polluting cyberspace and outer space, and that he shouldn't be allowed to exist. that nobody should be that rich. No individual should be able to destroy entire systems that affect the entire commons. And it's come into fruition. Now it's all about Musk's space junk hitting or nearly hitting airplanes, FAA warnings raining down on us all the time. Diana says Bezos kissed the ground and so did she. I'm sure that clip's going to show up. And as I said, when they show you the clip, you're not going to see them for the full 11 minutes. It's just going to be jump cuts. You're going to see them for a few seconds at a time. And it's dizzying. Like, why is this? And I think because if they were to do anything sustained, you would know it was fake. They couldn't pull it off. Where's the video of Katy Perry singing that song? We're not going to hear it. We just keep being told that we can confirm she sang this song. Well, you're up there recording it. Where's the audio, please? Okay, so we talked about the jump cuts. By the way, you may notice that in the archives, you're now getting infographics. So tonight, this one will go into the archives. Finally, we're practically glitch-free. So I take the transcripts and I do a summary using ChatGPT or something. And then I take the summary and I turn it into an infographic. So if you look at your email box, you can read a summary, get some direct quotes and links, or you can look at the graphic and at a glance, oh, they're talking about Jake the a-hole saying Jaren's going to flip on the moon landing. They talked about AI automation, the hoax report, and the PSYOP onslaught has just been relentless, is a quote from Tim Osman. So these are all generated by AI, and I've been working with automating even these, where my YouTube videos get scraped by this AI agent that I have, and it gives me a written breakdown and generates an image, and then it auto blogs it. So I'm doing what I can to remove myself from menial labor so I can focus on this. Lord Laney says kissing the ground is ball worship. Yeah, you know what? That's probably good. A good way of putting it. The word obelisk means shaft of ball. And Baal is another name for the earth god. You got Baal, you got Osiris. Saturn has these, when you look at the syncretizing of these various versions of the dead sun god, they all essentially have the same kind of form, same story, but they're represented by the obelisk. And these are themes. These are themes that come from that derive from religion, but we see them in the movies. I mean, they encoded this story into the fight between Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker when he gets his sword hand cut off, and then he hangs from a cross in Cloud City before they reattach it. So it's not hard to imagine the significance of the lightsaber, the sword, in a Freudian sense, and the loss of the sword hand, the severing of the sword, and then the reattachment. And this is an integral part of this myth. And the myth basically is about the sun giving its life to us over the course of the day until the Lord of Darkness, Darth Vader, night, Set, the Prince of Darkness, kills the sun at sunset. The death is accompanied by dismemberment. This symbolically represents the hours of the day. You know, it's the members of the deity being chopped up. So it's like 12 body parts, 14 body parts. It varies, but the idea is the day is being chopped up by the Lord of Night, generally represented by Saturn. That Saturn is bringing the darkness the way the sun brings the day. So this eternal fight between light and dark was played out with Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. And the whole thing about, you know, this finding out that his dad is Darth Vader is also very consistent with this mythology of where you have the idea of the sun god reincarnating after being Lord of the Underworld with the death-like skull visage of Vader. So there's this idea of the ever reincarnating Sun King. But again, one of the main symbols is the obelisk, because in the Egyptian version, after he's been chopped up by the Prince of Darkness, Isis, who's the goddess of the night sky, she can't find his severed member. It was cruelly discarded, hidden. I don't know what happened to it. So she buries the body parts she can find and then puts a stone obelisk over the grave to complete him. So that symbol is a symbol of reincarnation, regeneration, resurrection. And that symbol is featured strongly within the entire space program. The Saturn rocket, the Apollo mission, it's all sun worship stuff. And by the way, on the moon, Neil Armstrong performed a Catholic mass. And they kept it a secret for a while because some atheist was making a big hullabaloo about NASA reading Bible verses on their missions. But yes, on the moon, they performed the Holy Communion. You can read it, what he said about the wine in space going into the glass. Okay, let's continue here. We're just scrolling through my Twitter feed and catching up on things. Kate Perry, Lauren Sanchez, Gayle King expressed gratitude to the rocket ahead of their launch. So here they are, prostrating themselves before this obelisk, and Perry says, quote, "They're putting the ass in astronaut."
Where's Carrie Ann?
I've got to hear this clip from the Sky News where they talk about it being cringe. Pretty bad. And where's the 11-minute footage? Where's the song being sung in space? So in other news, a Satanist named Nikita Kasap kills his parents and gets the money, $17,000 from them, and tries to use it to go after Trump so that he can start a war, a race war or something to save white people. He looks like Nick Fuentes. Similarly, Mr. Satan was arrested for threatening Trump and Musk. So I think that's kind of interesting. The two most recent assassination plots involve Satan. One of them is Mr. Satan. The other one is a member of the Order of Nine Angels, a satanic neo-Nazi group that's been around for a long time. I've heard of them, and I've seen some of their symbols, but I never really met anybody who was a part of that. Okay, moving on. We've talked about the helicopter crashes quite a bit. We'll move past that. There's always such a glut of news. It's like 3 days of news every day. You can't possibly keep up with it all. Mr. Satan charged with threatening high-profile assassination. Pennsylvania man going, oh, he's from Butler, Pennsylvania, going by Mr. Satan threatened online to kill Trump, Musk, and ICE agents. Now, as I said, life follows Netflix. That cyber truck that blew up in front of Trump Tower was foreshadowing that these two were being symbolically destroyed, attacked. That was a message. And he was a Green Beret. And I thought that's interesting because the guy that shot the CEO is Luigi, and many pro-Luigi people are dressing like the video game character Luigi, who wears a Green Beret. And this anti-CEO, anti-Trump sentiment and this Green Beret, the green hat, the Robin Hood-esque nature of Luigi wearing the hood, and it was green. There's a theme here. And I think it connects to the green hair of the Joker. I would even say it connects to the symbolism of the Beetlejuice, this green-haired Joker archetype that came out at the same time as Joker 2. And in Beetlejuice, you have Trump in a gold suit in the underworld, dead, waiting in line. Lord Laney is a comment here. Gayle King cried on a show saying, quote, "People say I look like a Muppet." I think that was a shout out to her being a Meta-script puppet. Oh, it's 9 angles, not angels. Okay, my bad. Angels, not angles. Well, according to the high priest of the Church of Satan and Taylor Swift's dad, Anton LaVey, John Dee was referring to angles when he referenced angels in his Enochian magic. He made this enigmatic statement about it because, John Dee coined the term British Empire. I would consider him to be the godfather of modern occultism. Crowley borrowed from him. Ritual magic, whether it's satanic stuff or Wiccan stuff, all comes from essentially John Dee's work. And he used a black mirror to communicate with. That was a common theme with demonology, is you talk to the entities through a black mirror that you have outside of the triangle with your circle, and supposedly you can see them in this thing. They interact with it. So your iPhone might have another purpose, but his black mirror was actually on display. I think it was stolen. He was also a pen pal and an advisor to Gerardus Mercator, Mercator projection. And they have this correspondence about this supposed 33-mile circumference magnetic rock at the North Pole. Interesting character all around. But yeah, John Dee's birthday is 7/13, says Dwayne Bith. Fascinating. Did not know that. Well, he wrote these things called, and it references the book of Enoch. Enoch, the biblical patriarch who spoke to the fallen angels. So the system of magic he devised is called Enochian, for speaking with angels, supposedly. And this whole system that he devised had to do with scrying in a black mirror and invoking these entities. But his entire system of calling up these angels was drafted into the Satanic Bible. So the end of the Satanic Bible is a bunch of gibberish from John Dee, and they use it in their incantations. And in the description of the calls and their use, the author Anton LaVey writes that John Dee was referring perhaps to angles, not angels. Again, make of it what you will. But he's an interesting character all around. The original 007, spy, advisor to the Queen, astrologer, astronomer, and practitioner of magic, as well as being a mathematician, a cartographer, an alchemist. He was involved in a lot of things. Truth Hurt says, whatever happened to the small obelisks popping up in random spots? Oh yeah, the monoliths. So monoliths are distinct from the obelisk. However, it may represent the same thing ultimately. Because ultimately we're talking about, ball, the word ball means Lord. So obelisk, shafted ball, Lord's thing. Ultimately it's about the one. That's what, like monotheism. And I would argue that the monolithic control over media represents a one world church. It's a worldview monopoly. So it's all about the control over a singular, over everything by a singular entity. So I do think that we have a monotheistic metaphysical model presented to us as a scientific paradigm. And I think the symbol of the monolith is extremely pertinent. And this is why we analyze Kubrick's work so much, because 2001 Space Odyssey, the monolith, tells the story of the unification of man for the new age as we all merge with this monolith. Well, what does that mean? I believe it means the movie screen, that the monolith symbolizes the movie screen itself, and the dimensions of it even kind of bear this out. But when they show it, they have the eclipse, the sun and the moon. And in Jungian symbolism, this is the subconscious and the conscious mind. And I think the movies, the entertainment, pour information and ideas and narratives into our subconscious, our dreaming mind. And the news media and all the entertainment stuff with the celebrities, that pertains to the quote real world, the solar, the sun, the stuff that's lit by the sun. So you have these two aspects of our mind that are catered to separately, and I think they've merged the two, and that's the symbolism of this eclipse at the beginning of 2001 Space Odyssey. So that now this, what we get through the screen is the merging of real and fake, of dream and reality. And this is how it actually works. They create a fake story, a simulation, and they present it to you through the medium of news, and now it's real to you. You have actors portraying victims of school shootings who go from portraying a role of a victim in a fictional event, who are now accepted as real for having survived this thing, and they get into politics. It's like, so they have effectively blended the two. I think the 2001, if you get into the symbolism, 2 into 1, and the 2 zeros could be sun and moon. And so we see a lot of this alchemical stuff, like the Twin Towers, which were the focus of 2001 Space Odyssey's foreshadowing. The 2 towers have been replaced by the 1 tower, the One World Trade Tower. So this 2 into 1 formulation and the correspondence between that and the corona, which is associated with the eclipse, and the significance of the corona, the sun and the moon has all been neatly tied in with the One World Trade Tower, which happens to look like a giant syringe. And if you paid attention in 2020, the whole point of it was they synchronized the entire world yet again. Whenever they do a transformative psyop that touches the whole world, it's like a reset button, like the advent of the nuke, landing on the moon, 9/11, War on Terror, 2020. They use these big psyops to move us collectively forward into the next iteration of fake news. And fake news becomes history. These events are, in my view, contemporary myths. Girl says it takes mayors and governors, presidents and generals in uniform on TV to certify it and sanctify it as real. They have to wrap the flag around it to capture the masses. Yeah, that's an astute observation, because some people are like, how come we don't have crisis actors blowing the whistle? The focus on crisis actors is a purposeful misdirection. Notice how Alex Jones got sued over calling out crisis actors. Not once did he ask who wrote their scripts. And he didn't make it his focus to ask the bigger question. If this is fake, then who would be involved in it? It's not an isolated incident that CNN pulled off to trick Fox's audience and influence them. These psyops, and this is what I learned after studying these things intently for a few years, is that these things are partisan, but the sides do not call out each other's fakery. They'll disagree on why it happened. School shooting happens. Left will say it's because of the Second Amendment. The right will say, no, it's because of mental illness and SSRIs. So they both agree the fake thing happened, but they disagree on the cause. And that is one of the repeated patterns here. But if they were to ask the bigger question, how connected is it, or who's behind it? Well, every psyop, big or small, would necessitate the coordinated actions and involvement of media, politicians, police, EMTs, the hospitals, the Department of Homeland Security, and on up. So it's not a hoax. These are psychological operations, influence operations, propaganda operations. But to call it a hoax is to really minimize the extent of it. And not only that, this is systemic. If it was just CNN doing school shooting hoaxes, the right would expose it and destroy CNN and stop their agenda to grab the guns. But no, nobody does it. And think about it. Would Armalite have paid out $73 million if they had anything at all that could possibly prove the event didn't happen? No, they're all complicit. I'm not saying everybody knows. I mean, as I often say, the programmed are one level of society. The programmers are above, but also programmed themselves. At best, the programmers are let out on a need-to-know basis on a specific category of fakery, but I don't think there's a class of people totally in the know. It's necessarily going to be need-to-know basis, security clearances, compartmentalized. We're the only ones open sourcing all of this information that's for the backstage. Generally speaking, truthers understate the significance of the fakery. And I have to reiterate that the military industrial complex is mostly fake. What is real is the PSYOP entertainment complex. And if you're not recognizing the role that entertainment writ large plays in conditioning us for the day-to-day fake news, then you're missing half the point. I mean, this is really the key thing here. We have to recognize the intentional, deliberate, non-stop synchronization. These aren't anomalies like this episode here, that movie there. No, this is a daily thing. We are living right now in Black Ops 2. And it doesn't mean that everybody knows or recognizes that this is media manipulation, but they're experiencing the same media. You got millions of people playing Black Ops 2. They're being inundated with messages about China and the tariffs and a Cold War. And it has a date in this video game, April 19th, 2025, 4 days from now. So people playing this game are recognizing that 4 days from now, the game that they're playing is going to, in some way or somehow weirdly, mirrors what's happening right now with China. So let's get into that really quick. We've been talking about this for a few days. Call of Duty Black Ops 2, the 2025 Cold War between the United States and China, caused a massive cyber attack that crippled the Chinese stock exchange by hacked U.S. military drones controlled by... Anyway, the whole story is China. 2025 Cold War starts with America on 4/19. And we were discussing this. And then the next day on the Drudge Report, the headline story was about China kneecapping America with regard to rare earth exports. China suspends rare earth exports, kneecaps U.S. industry. And it's not just us. It's not just a few people, because the Economic Times put out an article. So for those who say that this is irrelevant or the fakery isn't noticed by a lot of people, it is. They just don't know the significance of it. Strange but true. This just came out 3 days ago. 13 years ago, a game predicted a severe trade war with China in 2025. Gamers are drawing, quote, eerie parallels between Call of Duty and Black Ops 2, noting the storyline predicted U.S.-China trade conflicts. The recent tariffs mirror the game's plot. Social media is abuzz with comparisons, especially the specific date aligning with present-day tensions. The uncanny resemblance is sparking discussions about the game's predictive accuracy. So you're looking at Call of Duty's audiences being inundated with news media, and these are probably not the same people watching the news who really care about Trump or China. No, they're just playing their game, but they're given this message. Quote, in a strange twist of reality mimicking fiction. It's not strange. It happens every day. Did Call of Duty Black Ops 2 predict the present? See, they're asking these questions, but they're not really following it through seriously, because of course they're not. This is just a coincidence. Set in a futuristic world, the storyline of Black Ops 2 envisions a second Cold War sparked by a cyber attack on China's stock market. The Chinese government retaliates by banning rare earth exports. This triggers global chaos and a standoff with the U.S. Not looking so fictional anymore. China is being hit with 84% tariffs. According to this uncanny prediction, the war begins on April 19th, days from now. So here are some clips or screen caps from Twitter. Black Ops 2 is about to happen in real life. Trump got his foreign policy from Black Ops 2. This is from Daily Mail. Call of Duty Black Ops 2 is trending because it has predicted the trade war with China. So again, just to reiterate here, the so-called predictive programming artifacts that we point out are force memed into the collective consciousness. It's not like a handful of us talking about it are noticing it. No, everybody's noticing. They just don't have a clue why. So all of the people talking about this and playing this game have been immersed in this story that's taking place on the world stage right now. And this is systemic. This is how it always happens. Now, here's a guy who recognizes this, and he thinks that this is investigated.
If I were to tell you 13 years ago a game developer would predict the future, you'd probably call me crazy, right?
This is crazy. That this is some kind of conspiracy and that somebody needs to be investigated. Somebody needs to be held accountable for having foreknowledge. And the reason why he would arrive at such an erroneous conclusion is he has no idea about media fakery, or more specifically, news bending. Because we don't just talk about media fakery here. We're talking about the systemic influencing of mainstream narratives for the purpose of curating and writing history day by day. Our history is being manufactured daily. You know, we can talk about fake history, but when does it begin? Oh, everything's fake. What? Prior to what year? Yesterday. Fake history starts right now. Every news story that's fake, every psyop, every simulated event that goes into the consensus worldview as real is part of our now shared history, fake or not. And this is why I can say that we are living in a news-bent reality. Our consensus version of things has been steered by who? By a media, rather, I would say by a worldview monopoly, world government. We live in the world they put us in. And in this world, rockets go to space, nukes are real, space junk might kill you tonight in your sleep. And if you don't recycle enough, there's going to be a flood that will destroy the world. Like, there's all these things they've added that are now part of our existence, real or fake. Okay, here we go. Keith Morris from the Jerks calls for a, quote, army of Luigis. And they played a song called Coup d'etat. So this was an event, I think in Coachella, California. A sudden, violent, and unlawful seizure of power from the government. There's a lot of pro-Luigi stuff. I had this clip I was going to play. This is Taylor Lawrence, and she worked for the New York Times. And it's not just that she's expressing this opinion, because every leftist would agree with her opinions. But I think the thing that's most striking about what she's saying is that they platformed this person. And yeah, she does indeed praise Luigi, calls him I think she calls him a smart, attractive revolutionary. Girl says, who wrote the scripts? Pentagon PsyOps consultants. Your guess is as good as mine. I would say that's mostly accurate, though. I think it's accurate to describe what we're looking at here as a military operation. It is Psy-war. This isn't, I mean, I call it the PsyOp entertainment complex, but it's effectively a form of subjugation through mind war, which is nicer than the other kind. Okay, so we have been live here for how long? An hour and 29 minutes, not including the glitches. But overall, I think this is doing okay. I don't think we've had any major upsets, no glitches. We haven't been shut down. So I think we're fine with StreamYards. And I'm going to test out some of its other features. Now, I'm not necessarily interested right now in talking too much about this simulation theory conversation we had earlier, but maybe we should. Maybe we should, because I want to offer clarity here. You know, what are we really saying? And I started off with an example or a list of examples of concurrent programming of news events released at the same time as their corresponding entertainment programs. But let's get into this. So I'm just answering questions. So on Twitter, JLB asks, so a headline in an MSM article, where are the people who care about predictive programming? And sync. They're not watching our content. They're not listening. We've got a few hundred people, maybe the low thousands, and most of them don't give a fuck either. And he has a point. We're in a minority of people who recognize it for what it is. But I'm talking about those who are experiencing it, the ones who are targeted with it, the multitudes. Everybody playing Black Ops 2, everybody watching any of these #1 TV shows, reading the top novels. They're all getting it. That's how it works. It's sort of like osmosis or mind viruses. The people who have mind aids, no mental immune system, they're passive receptacles for narratives, ideas. So my answer to him was predictive and concurrent programming is in all mainstream content. And that is the point. Immersion in ideas and images building up to future planned hoaxes. This is how news fakes history. By the way, I have these shirts that say Psywar. This one is light blue with red, which kind of makes it vibrate to the eyes. But I also have it in other colors and configurations. So I'll post a link if you want to order a shirt that says Psywar in bold caps. Skeptically Challenged said, with news media and geopolitical events, I'm inclined to agree with you. And we were talking about, is man behind these things or is it a higher power? But he says, when these events are seen in Hollywood movies and fictional programs, I'm not so rigid and inclined. So the prevailing wisdom in Trutherville is that the people in Hollywood, because they're artists, have these antennae and they pick up synchronicities from the universe and put it in their movies. My answer to that is the events that we document have both drills and entertainment parallels. The mystification of this topic is the only thing concealing the government influence over all entertainment and how it integrates with the planned psyops. Now, I made this graphic here. Again, I just want to juxtapose Occam's razor. The explanation that requires the fewest number of assumptions is generally the correct one. Law of parsimony. So we're talking about all these examples I gave of concurrent entertainment relating to the news. So Tinfoil Hat Guy says it's mystical synchronicity, simulation, matrix, collective unconsciousness, energy wave, quantum pattern, revelation of the method. We live in a video game and we can't know anything for sure. And that's because it's mind-blowing to look at these coincidences and recognize that these can't be coincidences. But if you haven't entertained the notion that we're being screwed with majorly by government, that they have their hands in all of the entertainment, that all of the actors have security clearances and they do psyops, if you haven't entertained that, then yeah, you're like, well, we must live in a video game and black magic occultists are telling us what they're going to do. And our collective unconsciousness is manifesting it because we live in the matrix. Like, that is insanity. And this is what they want. The people who notice what's going on can be put into the loony bins if they're taken at their word that they literally believe this stuff. In contrast, the presumable auto-hoaxer says to the truther, no, it's just propaganda. That's all it is. It's propaganda. And it makes sense to consider that the co-founder and CEO of Netflix is a relative of Edward Bernays and Sigmund Freud. You put these together, it all makes sense. Cygirl says, Newsbenders was broadcast by BBC in the late 60s, early 70s. I recall watching it. Newsbenders is required watching. And in that one, they simply make the case that they're writing the news 5 years in advance. Why? Because the nuke. Because mankind became so dangerous to himself that they decided to take a more heavy-handed approach, or rather a covert, but a more direct approach to controlling our minds by writing history 5 years in advance. Now, just take that idea and extend it 50 years in broad strokes, 100 years. Or if you look at the occultism and the New Age movements, aeons, thousands of years. This is going to characterize this aeon. This is going to characterize this century. This is going to characterize this decade. And as you go down closer and closer into the execution dates of these events, you're going to have to make last minute changes, I'm sure, but generally they can make the picture comport. And also the media's power to shape reality is in what it chooses to focus on. So they give inordinate attention to the fake events. The fake events that are performed on the world stage take all of the attention. They take the spotlight. So even if they only fake a small percentage, it dominates. One of the straw man arguments you will hear against the Meta-script theory that I'm proposing here is that, oh, you're just saying everything's fake and everybody knows about the fakery. No, it's compartmentalized. It's like a security clearance, and only a small percentage has to be faked in order to bend the news, which they do. Napoleon Bonaparte is credited with saying, history is lies agreed upon. And I would say media is lies agreed upon. So Skeptically Challenged said, and we're talking about these different events, he says, acknowledge the event, but I just don't agree that it's manipulation without evidence to confirm. And what I said here is that's what we're doing. The evidence that we are dredging up here points to consistent and predictable patterns. Media fakery is systemic. It's not a theory. It is systemic. News bending is built into the structure of mass media. Every single mystical explanation is misdirection, likely controlled opposition. And, I don't care what people think or believe. I'm more interested in what is true and verifiable. And we are verifying this stuff. And to say otherwise is to have to necessarily entertain the idea that I'm a prophet because I am consistently predicting things based off of this. But this is what we do. And we've set up a wiki in order to expand this. And I have many, in fact, let's look at one of my posts here. So if you haven't seen it yet, just go to autohoax.com, take a look. I'm just going to grab one of my recent articles. Leave the World Behind, Predictive Programming and Donnie Darko Connections. There are several real-life developments that mirror themes and scenarios depicted in Netflix Leave the World Behind. There was stuff with the self-driving Teslas crashing. The director even acknowledged, quote, eerie coincidences, but he said it was, quote, purely accidental timing. And that's in the collider.com. Leave the World Behind. And by the way, he wrote that's the director. The author of the book is credited with having predicted 2020. So the book predicted lockdowns and the movie predicted cybersecurity concerns, plane incidents, critical infrastructure, ransomware attacks on pipelines and hospitals. And everything I'm saying here has citations. The film includes unsettling scenes of strange animal behavior. This resonates with the real-world reports of wildlife exhibiting unusual patterns due to habitat loss and climate change. There's more. There's connections with Donnie Darko. The Frowning Clock, both films feature a frowning clock. I only bring up Donnie Darko because that movie has 9/11 predictive programming. And you'll notice a pattern here. The pattern is these movies are all part of the same fictional universe. And Donnie Darko's director's father worked for NASA on the Viking rover on Mars. So you got the son of a NASA guy doing a movie that's been widely noted for predicting 9/11, also 2020, also Trump, and it contains a lot of Q stuff as well. But that movie was reiterated in Leave the World Behind in several different direct ways, direct references, but also it reiterated certain themes. End of the world, planes crashing. Hollywood Reporter article discusses how Leave the World Behind began trending on social media after a nationwide cell phone outage in the US, and viewers drew comparisons between the outage and events in the film, where a cyber attack led to widespread communication failures and societal disruptions. The quote, eerie similarity between the movie plot and the outage sparked conversations about, quote, predictive programming, with users noting how the film's themes aligned with contemporary vulnerabilities. So this is just one of the articles, and it's just the surface look at this stuff. But the AI is really enhancing our ability to draw attention to these things. So my intention here is, let me get 100 of the most conclusive and exacting examples of movies and life being mirrored, suggesting a central directorship. And then I want to bring this up and have the people who want to default to the mystical explanations confront it and say, what is your best explanation for what I'm saying? Because what I'm saying is there. And if your best explanation is a higher power or a simulation, then what does that make me? A prophet? Chosen by the simulation to reveal its messages? I mean, I would reject those explanations, but you can't ignore the evidence we're bringing here. And those old explanations only made sense 10 years ago, 5 years ago, before we had amassed all this information and correlated it and realized it's deliberate, it's systemic, and it's always been there. Stefana says, hello, do you believe a spiritual world exists? You know, really, that's kind of immaterial to this. I don't believe in the veracity of any religion's claims, religious miracles. I think religion is old school fake news, that media is in fact the newest iteration of religion. Why would I follow religion if I don't trust media? I would posit here that media not only has replaced the role of religion as far as worldview formation and getting us all on the same sheet, but I think that modern media has even replaced a lot of the myths with contemporary versions. I mean, look at the flood myth and Noah's Ark and how that has been reintroduced with the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, who used the same iconography. Why is NASA and why are these environmental satellites always making use of biblical symbolism? It's because the flood myth has been reintroduced for the atheists. And I think that the new religion is just going to be exhibiting more of the same. Aliens are angels for the atheists, for example. So I reject religions. I reject the simulation religion. I reject the mainstream media religious paradigm. And I don't believe any of the religions have the truth. I think all religions are lies. I think the media is lies. And one of the points of discussion today on Twitter was when I accused the people who are pro-offering simulation theory or synchronicity as an explanation for news of using the divine fallacy. And there was a misunderstanding here. Divine fallacy refers to any higher power being inserted to explain what you can't explain. We're not just talking about the Judeo-Christian God. So if you're saying, no, I don't think God is manipulating Hollywood and movies and making these coincidences, I think it's the simulation. Same thing. Your simulation is a metaphysical construct. It's a God construct. Braveheart says you should start asking MSM people about what denomination they are. Fox, CNN. Yeah, it's absolutely like that. The mainstream box has two subsets: Trutherville on the right, Woke Town on the left. You got the sleepers in the middle. And the woke are only woke because they're not sleepers like these people. The truthers are awake and red-pilled because they're not dreaming like the blue pillars. You see the dynamic here? Some people aren't going to be satisfied with the status quo propaganda. So they're given alternative stories so they don't call it all fake. So they don't reject it entirely. And these stories are intriguing. They get you involved. Now you can fight the New World Order, or you can fight the man. If you lean left, you go to Woketown. You lean right, you go to Trutherville. But these are both MSM plus. These are both subsets of the mainstream. They're both contained in the political horseshoe. And the political horseshoe and everything they fight about presupposes that all the fake news is real and all the fake events are real and that the fake history happened as reported, including all the psyops that we have deconstructed. So if you're woke, you're operating in that fictional universe. If you're a truther, you're in that fictional universe. Like, I'm not in the same universe as Woketown and Trutherville or Normieville. I am off the grid. And if you are a truther in a bunker, clutching your gun and your Bible, eating MREs, and listening to Alex Jones, and you're safe now because you're in your bunker, you're not off the grid, even if nobody knows where you are. You're even more on the grid than I am. And I'm like right here next to a 5G tower connected to the internet. And I say this because mentally, you're still a prisoner if you think you need to hide in a bunker from weapons of mass destruction that will not be used because they do not exist. All right, let's continue. Dwayne, apophenia. Yeah, let's talk about that. Apophenia. Bad Mind says, our mind tries to see patterns where there are none. Yeah, that's true. But what I'm pointing out here are patterns that do exist that you couldn't fabricate. If this was just merely my subjective cherry-picked interpretation, then you would be able to reproduce this at random. For example, grab a random headline and find something in the most popular Netflix show right now that mirrors it. That's all we're doing. It's formulaic. But the consistency of it is what we're noting. And I point to the examples that the mainstream has taken note of just to take this idea out of the conversation that only a few people notice. So predictive programming exists, but the idea that okay, the Daily Beast did an article about this, and they said, oh, we're just primates. We're pattern recognizing primates. Okay, well then how come we're the only ones noticing this pattern? If we're all primates and we're all just conditioned to recognize it, then why are 99% of the population rejecting it when we point it out? And they will pathologize it. They'll say, oh, these patterns are not there and you're crazy for seeing it. Okay, well then I'm predicting these things. I can understand accusing apophenia as being the cause of somebody who is making connections and predictions that never come true. It's very subjective. Apophenia is a form of subjectivity, a loss of objectivity. It's a form of mental illness or schizophrenia. And we are insisting on objective facts. And I'm presenting them to you. And you're welcome to ignore them or confront them. Look at my deep dive article, video on Donald Trump and all of the foreshadowing for his head wound. So it just raises the question about what media really is. But if psyops are real, it's a game changer in and of itself. If media uses fakery and simulated events on the routine, yeah, that's a paradigm shift. But the people who would say that there's nothing to see here are not Psy-War aware. Do you include in your assessment in what's happening on the world stage the fakery? And how far have you taken it? It's one thing to say, yeah, this launch with Bezos and Kate Perry was fake, and accept that, sure. But that must also have significance for other space agencies. It doesn't simply relate to Jeff Bezos. For example, if Musk's faking it, well, then how are these astronauts in the ISS getting the supplies that he's sending up there? If he's faking it, they're faking it. But the explanation of apophenia doesn't quite cut it, because we're talking about objectively measured things. And a lot of these connections that we're talking about can be researched and can be noted. And again, it's one of three things. It's mere coincidences. And if it's coincidences, it's amazing. Think about that. Let's just pretend we're normies here and we have total faith and trust in government and media. And they would never lie to us. And they would never manipulate us through covert means. So let's pretend that's true. If that is the case, then Netflix has a remarkable ability to forecast the future, because their productions are being created, scheduled, and then on their release dates, real life is following them. So then you're left with major news agencies and movie film production companies are all somehow prophetic. So how do you explain that? How do you deal with the fact that they're all exhibiting the ability to forecast the future? That's not something that I could explain away. But even if you can, you're left with, okay, it's just a bunch of amazing coincidences. And then some will say, well, it's synchronicity. It's the universe. Because they recognize that this is too much to merely be coincidence. But I would say too, what is so hard about believing that the same people that can fake a terror attack in Manhattan can also manipulate all of the entertainment news and entertainment media leading up to it? If they can fake dinosaurs, if they can fake history, they can fake entertainment. Rather, they can fake the news and manipulate the entertainment to correspond with it. But we have been piling up more and more evidence in support of this, to the point where I would like any critic or skeptic of it to review what I'm releasing. Review what I am positing here. I'm not saying believe me, but I am saying that what I'm showing here is true. This is an accurate description of how things are happening. Media is not what you've been taught. So let me bring up this article that I posted today. I want to get through this before we leave. This one's called Reasonable Doubt in Auto-Hoaxing, because I think it's a cop-out when anybody says, I don't know, I wasn't there. Okay, that's fine. You can take that position. You can say you don't know anything and your mind is feeble and incapable of discerning fact from fiction. I am forever confused and in the fog. Yeah, that's fine. You can be there. But I'm not there. And being ambiguous about what's real and fake is not an excuse to claim an intellectual high ground. Like, oh, you guys are way too certain about what you're claiming, but I have no clue what's going on. Like, well, that's nothing to be proud of. We do have a clue and we know what we're talking about. So, for example, reasonable doubt. I am 100% sure the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania was fake. And to suggest that it might have been real is the same thing as saying, well, maybe Kate Perry really went to space. Or maybe the next moon landing will be real. Well, if you know that space fakery is the norm, at no point are you going to say the next one is going to be real. The skeptic's job is not to doubt their own perceptions, but to prioritize the perceptions over what they're being told. And when there's a discrepancy, the skeptic is supposed to suspend their judgment until facts can be gathered to explain the discrepancy. After consulting the available information, they can make an informed judgment. But all of these doubts have to be addressed before claiming with certainty the event was real. But mainstream believers don't have any doubts. They have faith. Now, if a skeptic cannot prove the event false, they don't have to accept, therefore, that it's real. It's like the magic show analogy. I don't know how all these magic tricks work, but it doesn't mean it's magic. Like, I don't know how he pulled his thumb off in front of the audience. Must be magic. No, I don't know. I don't know how the astronauts are doing somersaults on the ISS. Therefore, they're in space. Nope, doesn't follow. That's called the either-or fallacy. I don't know what model the Earth is because I don't trust the globe, but since I don't have an alternative model, it must be a spinning ball. These are either-or fallacies that get you to accept a bad explanation if you can't find an alternative, and it's not really on you to in all instances, or it may not be possible, thus suspending judgment. So the approach of media is real until proven fake, that might have been okay. Like when you give somebody the benefit of the doubt, like, I'm going to assume you're telling the truth until I catch you lying. Once you catch somebody lying about something significant, then you never trust them again. Or you recognize that they're capable of lying. But if you don't know they're a liar, they can fool you all the time. Naive audiences don't know that media is a liar. It's a liar, but it's a good liar. It lies strategically when it has your trust, but it's a liar. They don't even know it's capable of lying. We do. So what I say is that we go with it is fake until proven real. And it's very easy to prove it real. So don't complain about that. If you're in media, it's your job to present the facts. The mainstream news consumers believe by default because they don't know it's a liar. They don't know about hoaxes. They don't know about media fakery. And to them, it's a conspiracy theory that the media would ever lie or fabricate something. It's a conspiracy theory that they would simulate a mass murder for political ends. So they don't know. So they don't, and I'm talking about mainstream consumers of news, they don't include in their assessment the fact that they're dealing with a liar. They're extremely naive in this regard. But if you're apprised of media fakery and psyops, then you cannot advocate for the truthfulness of a particular news story if there's any doubts. Like anything at all that raises any doubts means that you have to assume it's fake until proven real. The skeptic can say, I don't know all the intricacies of the hoax and its performance, but I know it was a hoax. With the same confidence that we can say, I don't know that how the magician did the trick, but I know it's not real magic. So you can rest on your doubts. So are there reasons to doubt the Butler, Pennsylvania story? Well, yeah, one, Trump was involved in a wide-scale psyop called January 6th. Trump was not a clueless outsider to what happened on January 6th. We can demonstrate this in a number of instances and in different ways. But January 6th was a staged event. Ashley Babbitt did not die. Trump was also somewhat involved in the 9/11 hoax. He even claims he saw the towers hit the building. So from that, we can conclude that Trump is already involved in wide-scale psyops, even 2020. He exists as a fixture in predictive programming. Amazingly, he has shown up in various forms in entertainment since 1958. So he's a character. And that might be a hard one for people to understand, but it shouldn't be. A crisis actor pretending to have witnessed an event is a character. Trump is a character who pre-existed himself. I mean, that role I mentioned of Robert De Niro as the Senator McLaughlin getting shot, that's a movie from 2010, before Trump was even a xenophobic politician. His role preceded him in that particular capacity. He hadn't become Trump the politician yet, but Trump the politician had already been presented to us. What's more, we're talking about Butler, Pennsylvania, recycled photographers from previous psyops, the same AP lensman who immortalized Bush's blank stare on 9/11 was the same guy who photographed the bullet whizzing by Trump's ear. Now think about the significance. Bush has a Secret Service agent whispering into his ear about 9/11. Same photographer photographs a bullet whizzing by Trump's ear. So same photographer, two different presidents, the ear is being pointed out in both, which I think is kind of an interesting coincidence. There's a few other elements to it. There's more, the PR stunt like optics, the Braveheart photo shoot he did. Another key point here, informed disbelief weighs more than low information belief. So my informed disbelief about any event has more credibility as far as the perspective that I offer than somebody who believes it because they saw it on TV. Low information belief. But what do we know? We know for sure that fake news aggregates, piles up, and it becomes history. And as I said, you can look at any history book. All of the conspiracy theories or the hoaxes and psyops that we talk about are printed in the history books as real events. So we have lived through it, and we live through it daily. History is lies agreed upon. It's largely fake. So we know this to be true. And if you can accept the premise that history is being written by the conquerors, what makes you think they only rewrite or revise things? What I'm positing here is that history is written by the conquerors. We are the conquered, and they write the history in advance and act it out on the world stage, day by day, year by year. Fake until proven real only if. We're not saying everything's fake, but if there's extraordinary claims, hoax indicators, ready-made, bifurcated political agendas, crisis actors, relevant predictive concurrent programming, and drills. For example, the AA flight hits the helicopter, and I said, wait, let's see if there's any drills. We already have predictive programming. We got flight risk that just came out. Sure enough, not only were there drills at that time in that place for pulling people out of ice water, but the event itself happened in the context of a drill, a continuity of government drill for evacuating VIPs. They were doing a drill when it happened. So when we say drill, what do we really mean? We mean closed movie set. We mean essentially like a Hollywood movie set where they could blow anything up. They could kill people. They can do all sorts of things. So why do we not go with real until proven fake? Well, one, it's illogical. The burden of proof goes upon the claimant. And two, how can low information believers claim it's real if they're not accounting for the frame of reference they're given? And they would claim to they would say something's real, perhaps in ignorance of the media's capability of lying. I mean, the fakeability question here is important. Like, what is fakeable? Some people don't know. They can fake terror attacks. They can fake anything. If they can fake it in the movies, they can fake it on TV. Okay, let's continue. Going through your comments. We've got about 78 people here. We're only on YouTube at the moment, but we're going to be expanding here onto some other platforms. So we're talking about why we say it's fake until proven real. Conclusion: there's plenty of reasonable doubt about the reality of the assassination attempt in Butler. In addition to predictive programming, there are many examples of concurrent programming. Stuff we didn't, some of it I haven't mentioned here. The stuff from magazines, stuff that was even noted by mainstream, stuff that happened after, like the Beetlejuice or Time magazine, which related to the second shooting. So Ryan Routh is hanging out at the golf course with his gun. Trump is on the golf course, and the Secret Service stopped Ryan Routh from shooting him. Time magazine released an issue on 9/11. It had Trump in a sand trap on a golf course with a red flag in the back. And the headline was, Trump's in trouble. So I'm like, that's interesting. 9/11, Trump's in trouble, golf course, sand trap, red flag. It all points to it. Continuing, those of us who have been paying attention to the correlation between fake events and entertainment propaganda noted a predictable pattern that makes us capable of accurately guessing what's coming in the next event. We're not confused about what is real or fake. This is not apophenia. We're not ambiguous. The doubts that we bring up here do not leave us in a state of confusion. They give us certainty that the liars are lying again. So again, I think it's important to reiterate here that we're not here basking in confusion. We're not a bunch of confused people walking around. What the hell's going on? No, that's the masses. That's the entrained masses who don't know real from fake and don't know they don't know. They don't know that they're unaware that real and fake have been effaced. They don't know they live in a simulation, a mental simulation, superimposed over the objective world. But we know that there is a difference, a discrepancy between the worldview, what I call the world stage, and the real thing. They don't even know because they haven't stepped outside of it. Media fakery does not operate in a vacuum. It's coordinated. The entertainment industry runs parallel with psychological operations by design. This is concurrent programming. They don't just foreshadow events, they sync them in real time. These coincidences aren't happening by accident. They happen by production schedule. These are scheduled alignments, scheduled by people at Netflix, people at the news. And this does not mean that everybody knows, nor would it even be required. In fact, the writers of the movies would not need to be in the know about very much. But if you're still asking if it's real or fake, like it might have been real, I don't know. Maybe he really got shot, maybe he didn't. I would say that is a very uninformed perspective that misses the point. We're not debating, was Trump shot in the ear or wasn't he? We're asking, what was the agenda behind the fakery? I'm not at this point where I'm still ambiguous. Like, I'm not confused. Like, maybe he got shot, but maybe he didn't. If I was ambiguous, I would be super confused. Like, wait a minute here. How is it possible that this happened and it was mirrored by all this entertainment at the same time? Because that's a lot to explain away. So a couple more points. Reasonable doubt is all you need to reject the official version. You can be a non-believer. And the only logical explanation for entertainment propaganda mirroring the psyops is that these are coordinated by the same entity. We have effectively ruled out higher powers when it comes to media coincidences. We have. And if you disagree, I would invite you to point out one single media entertainment event that could only have been orchestrated by something higher than man. Show me the hand of God at work. Show me the hand of the simulation at work. Just one time. And I'll show you 100 examples where it can conclusively be demonstrated to have been authored and executed by human beings. But again, any doubts raised for any event are sufficient enough to not believe it. So I have a couple of articles linked here. If you haven't seen these, 11 Trump predictive programming examples. And then I have a deep dive video on the same, if you haven't seen these. But this is just scratching the surface. The foreshadowing is precise. Not only is it precise, but look at this one. This is from The Atlantic. This came out a couple weeks before. It has a red curtain over Trump's head. It looks like blood dripping down his face. We were talking about this before it happened. Look at the ear. The top of the ear, exactly where Trump got shot. And this is the third example I can point to from The Atlantic, foreshadowing the same. I found this out after the fact. Let's say you were watching Batman Caped Crusader and you see the finale. Well, you got this character, Rupert Thorne, very Trump-esque, and Batman sends him a warning. And the warning shot is in the form of a boomerang that cuts his right ear. And then it cuts off, and we're waiting for season 2. Bit of foreshadowing, another Batman connection to the whole thing. But again, Batman declares war on Rupert Thorne. Okay, I think we have covered pretty much everything I want to get to today. I was mostly interested in troubleshooting. I wanted to make sure we didn't still have issues just getting the live stream on. I have an article here called DEI Hoax and Right-Wing Wokeism. And I think I should go over this really quick here. Yeah, if you want to call in too, that's perfectly fine. So let me bring this up really quick. The latest helicopter crash was likely a hoax. How do I make this claim? Well, because it follows a predictable pattern. The right blamed this one on DEI, as they did the previous one. The left blames Trump for firing air traffic control. The right blames DEI. So the instant that you see that the event is politically divided straight down the middle, or it has coincidental drills or entertainment, you can just go ahead and doubt it. Jason Goodman couldn't find evidence of it on the ground. But then there's this. Here's Ann Coulter. She says, I wonder why it took them so long to tell us who the pilot was. She did the same thing with the previous one. The implication being, because it's a non-white pilot, the crash was caused by Democrat DEI policies. Now, this is the standard talking point of the far right. And I'm saying that reality doesn't always perfectly split down the middle and follow a predictable course. And so instead of asking, is it even real? Right-wingers will say, this was caused by DEI. And left-wingers, of course, will say the opposite, or they'll accuse the right of being racist. And it's also interesting that the right wing generally worships Navy SEALs and the military. And in this case, the pilot's a Navy SEAL. But to them, nope. So DEI is misconstrued on purpose to aggrieve the right wing. And none of this is new. They've established this dialectic of white cis male versus world progressivism globalism. So you have the globalists committing white genocide, and this is part of right-wing wokeism, which is the same thing as wokeism, just on the opposite side. So they can point to DEI, and they can claim race and sex-based discrimination against them. Far right can claim that it is a sexist government, but it's sexist against males. It's a racist government, but it's racist against whites. Nobody believes them about their white genocide. So we're all white genocide Holocaust deniers. So I call it right-wing wokeism because it's a mirror of wokeism, which just has a different scapegoat. And as a rule, any tragedy that's perfectly divided along party lines is likely a psyop. And the term tragedy always strikes me as a red flag. But so the media are not merely opportunistically using crises and tragedies to advance agendas. They're manufacturing fake crises. They're manufacturing events that have predictable interpretations and political utility. The fake part of it is what truthers miss. So they take part in a rigged game. I have a couple of other notes here about it. It ties into Trump and Obama and the significance of 1776, 1619, the clash of two worldviews. But my main thing here is DEI is a manufactured controversy. It started after Leave the World Behind, where planes were falling from the sky. And then there were a spate of airline disasters and mishaps that the right blamed on DEI. At the same time, the left is blaming deregulation and crony capitalism. So both sides are being driven to their most extreme positions. The left is waging class war. Mainstream liberals are vandalizing Cybertrucks and calling for the heads of Musk and Trump. We see it on both sides. I have an article called Partisan Fears in the Bifurcated Mind War. And if you look at the AI generated images, I said I needed an image of right-wing wokeism. And it gave me what looks like a bunch of blue-haired MAGAs. Like it's actually a bunch of, to me, it looks like lefties with blue hair, but dressed in American flags, waving flags. It's very incongruent. But this is how Grok interprets right-wing wokeism. Okay, let me open up the phones here. I'm glad you're actually calling because I wanted to test out my new system here. Okay, you can call in 3, 2, 1. Phones are officially open. And I'm not going to put the phone on the screen, so don't worry about your number. I was kind of worried that it would put your... Okay. Hey, caller, can you hear me okay? Oh, Leo Pirate. Okay. Well, we covered a lot of ground tonight. We've been live for a couple of hours here after a few glitches, but what is your take on the contemporary psyops? They should be able to hear you now. I had give it just let me double check. Oh no, I am in fact sharing. I am sharing the screen, but it's just not on the stage. Nothing yet. They're saying. Okay.
Probably goes with the shared window,
okay.
and I get, yeah, you
Okay.
wouldn't want to put.
Let me see if I can, in some way. I want to find out. If
not show the number.
Yeah, not show the number.
Maybe like another tab.
Yeah, exactly.
If you had like another tab and dragged in the whole window or something.
Right. Okay, let me see if I can make that happen. Okay, I think I might have solved the problem.
Okay. This is just me talking to see if anyone can hear me and all that stuff.
Yeah,
I'm talking, testing 1, 2, 3.
I'm
seeing if
pretty sure we're good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're good. Let me just give a couple more seconds for anybody in chat. If you can give me some feedback, clear sound.
Yeah, people are saying loud and clear.
Okay. Okay. Good. Okay. Good.
Fantastic. And I was going to say, also for the gremlins and issues, StreamYards is really good in terms of what I've seen. I have not personally used it. I use OBS and Restream, but StreamYards is minimal setup, takes away all the bit rate, all the settings in OBS. So I definitely think StreamYards is a good way moving forward, though I know it's paid, but it's something to keep in mind. It also resizes you really nicely. Like we can see when you're not having anything on the screen, you're full. When you put something on the screen, it automatically resizes. So it's pretty good. Right?
Yes. I mean, the only thing it lacks, I think, are some of the things you can add from code, like chat on the screen, Godzilla noises. But for the most part, this is good. And it also combines all the best aspects of Zoom. I can do Zoom-like conferences on this thing. So I'm going to do some more of those. We get these think tanks where we confront a certain topic like we did with the auto hoax con. But yeah, I think that this will work. So I jumped over to StreamYard just so we can, get some content here without constant interruptions.
Yeah, and I was going to say, the more modern system is people calling in through the internet. And I know you had last time done it like through Discord and through others, and it's such a nightmare. So if StreamYard allows a way to like allow a web caller to come in, I don't know how. But yeah. Anyway, I would say it's that, and also just make sure that you have a Ethernet connection to your tower. Because if you have Wi-Fi, that's what can cause massive fluctuations in connection speeds and bottlenecks when you watch a video. So like if you watch a video on a website, that's, you know, taking up part of your bandwidth, and like, just something to keep in mind. That's technical stuff. But before, you were asking me what I thought about the psyops. One thing about the political bifurcation, or the two explanations they provide for people to fight over, it's always within the box. So when the two explanations never account for media fakery, that's another massive telltale sign. It's assumed to be true.
Exactly. You know, it's like this old adage about how if you're a car salesman, if you can get the couple to start squabbling over the color of the car, then you've already sold them the car. And they get people squabbling over who did it, and no one questions, did it even happen? And that's why they put so much emphasis on DEI or on government deregulation. So each side is like, oh yeah, of course I believe it because of this. Of course they crashed. The pilot was a woman. And they play into the biases of each side in order to get them to believe it faster and not even debate it. And I would argue that these political narratives that give an interpretation to the event are a form of predictive programming, which does the same thing. It conditions you for this future fake event, so you just react to it according to predictable tracks that they've laid down for you.
Yeah, and I had a really disheartening conversation with a friend who is in, you know, alt media, right? You know, in, I wouldn't say Trutherville, but like, you know, far, you know, right Trutherville and stuff like that. And he was very, just red in the face, you know, in an online conversation saying, I'm critical of media. I don't believe what the media says. You're just insane and stuff. And I really think it comes down to Trump with the co-opting the term fake news. People think fake news means bias or spin or covering the event in a way that doesn't, you know, that affirms a liberal view and not the real. And again, yeah, they don't know that fake news means crisis actors, stage closed sets, predictive programming, political bifurcated narratives to explain it, assuming it's true. No one knows about that checklist you went over.
Right. Well, that's one thing I like to point out here too, is that when we're talking about somebody being MSM or MSM plus, that's their frame of reference for interpreting all media. And I call these passive modes. They passively accept their source's information. And from that frame of reference, they cannot include things outside of it. So if you're a normie, you can't process somebody saying something that includes extra information that you haven't accounted for. Like media fakery doesn't exist for them. For truthers, you know, they're challenged by things like when you say nobody died. They're like, of course they died. This was a satanic sacrifice. So you just find their box really informs how they interpret any information they're given. And they do so passively, as opposed to critical, which is, of course, the active role. But you cannot tell someone in MSM plus something from off the world stage and expect them to comprehend it. They'll fight it. They'll fight tooth and nail against the fakery that man's manipulating man through mass media. No, they'll reach for something outlandish, or the normies won't get it. So yeah, again, it's a box thing. And I just don't think that people are reachable. And the only people who are even close to being reachable are those who are dissatisfied with the status quo in alternative media.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. Because he is very, you know, dissatisfied with the status quo, and he's in the alt-right kind of Trutherville box. It's just the thing is, I almost think it's an emotional sunken cost fallacy, because he's so emotionally invested in the alt-truther, you know, Trutherville narratives, right? The idea that all of the political theater that he has invested in researching who funds who and their connections, to say, yeah, all that research you've done is valid, but you're researching actors. It's kind of like telling you, yeah, everything that you've been doing is just totally, it also removes agency as well. You notice that these types are very activist driven, right? They want to make a change on the world stage. And if you tell them no, it's like yelling at your screen with Walter White, thinking you're going to change the next episode. It's like, if I yell enough, then maybe the investigator will know that Walter White is just under his nose. That's ridiculous, but it's like that for our current media system.
Well, some of them believe in what they're doing to the extent where their identity is attached to it, their emotions. Like when I first encountered QAnoners, I lost a friend to QAnon, and this person was an auto hoaxer. They knew media was lying, but then when Trump came along, they said, no, Trump is the truth, and only the Democrat media lies. And I remember at the time, though, they said, don't you want to save the children? Why are you constantly bad-mouthing Q? What am I supposed to say? No, I don't want to save the children. But they operate on the presumption that there are children to be saved. You get environmentalists in the same way, save the whales. You get somebody to think that they're fighting for a real cause, then you're saying it's fake. Yeah, of course, they've invested so much emotion into that. And a lot of Q people have managed to put down the Q pipe, but they're never going to come out and admit it. It gradually died off because the Q drops stopped, but that's the only reason. But they invested emotionally in it, so they're going to be diehard believers in JFK coming to save them until the end. And I thought maybe a lot of them moved on, but anytime there's any kind of glimmer of hope, they come back. Like when they said the JFK files are about to be released, a bunch of QAnoners just came out of the woodworks. I'm like, wow, they're about to get another dose, I guess. But
and I also think it's beyond their scope to comprehend that our mass media narcissistic system can also engineer underdogs. Because I do recall during Trump's first term, it did feel like he was an underdog because of how much the MSM and just basically every talking head was speaking against him. And on anonymous image boards, there was the meme magic. People thought that by posting Pepe frogs, they were like memeing or influencing the world stage to get Donald Trump into office. It seems ridiculous to say now, but I'll tell you, I witnessed firsthand, people really did believe this. And they thought they were practicing chaos magic. They thought like, oh man, if I put these occult sigils and memes and stuff, then people will begin to accept the God Emperor. And I just always remember thinking this is nonsense. And yeah, it's like they can buy a narrative if they're sold an underdog. But as you mentioned in today's episode, the narrative of Trump being this business mogul who comes from the outside in has existed even arguably before he was born, if you go all the way back to that one TV show episode in the 1950s. And if you think the Ingersoll Lockwood books are actually truly dated, not retroactively made to fit into a narrative.
Right. And by the way, Trackdown came out in 1958, so he would have been 12. And that came out on May 9th, 1958. The next day is the date for a Quantum Leap episode where Sam goes back into 1958, same date as Trackdown, basically, and he's a cab driver. And in the back seat is Fred, Christ, Trump, and a young Donald Trump who would have been 12. So there's actually a consistency in the predictive programming of Trackdown and Quantum Leap. Quantum Leap has the time travel theme, but they both reference Trump. One of them is a grown-up Trump, and the other one is the child Trump, aged appropriately. But anyway, it's pretty intriguing how far back Trump goes. Same with Musk. Musk, before he was, this world stage persona, he existed as a idea and as a character in Werner von Braun's book, Mars, A Technical Tale. And he's lived out that role like it were prophecy.
And the blending of fiction and reality, we even see that because pretty sure Elon Musk was in Iron Man 2 or something. And in Iron Man 1, they had that guy on MSNBC who says like, buy, sell. In The Madness, the main character was from CNN and stuff. These are shows that ostensibly exist in reality, right? But here they are in fictional movies. And when people observe that crossover, they just think it's funny, kind of weird. They just think, oh, maybe they want it to be authentic. That's the other thing. People think it's so authentic when they get these real things. I'm like, no, it's a part of the same entertainment system, news, entertainment, media, right? And they're so brazen about it, because I think with the last Auto Hoax Con, or the one you had with Reverse History, he had a clip where, was it Stephen Colbert, where they openly made the connection you're talking about with the Quantum Leap episode, right? Like,
Yes, and as I said with the Trackdown episode, the Trump character gets arrested. So at the time people noticed it, he hadn't been arrested yet. And it's like, again, does life really follow art? And if you operate on the premise that the news media is objective, then you're left with magical explanations. And I still used to hear simulation people saying they put out this stuff in the media so that we manifest it for them. So we need to stop watching the stuff. And a lot of these people, and honestly, sometimes it seemed coordinated. I'd be in a chat room with 5 or 6 people telling me, you need to stop watching the news. You're manifesting this. You're causing it. Like, they're blaming me for what helicopter crashes. Did I burn Los Angeles? Like, I'm manifesting it because I'm paying attention to it. So I realized these manifestors, these self-proclaimed genies, have this like talking point where they keep trying to get you to not pay attention. Like, oh, you know it's fake, so stop feeding it your attention. And to me, that's like saying, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. If you're telling me not to pay attention because it's taking my loosh, oh, it's fake, don't look, I don't trust you. Your response should be, it's fake, let's look closer. Let's find out who, what, why, how.
exactly, what are the implications? And I'll tell you, long before I found the IPS, that was the model I had ascribed to because of the book, The Kybalion, which is a translation of the Emerald Tablets, which essentially posits that idea that the polarities of reality can be, you can attune mass populations to it to manifest or crystallize it in reality. And I really did think that. In fact, before the IPS, it's like I couldn't watch the news or movies. I mean, I would around people, but it's like, it felt like water torture and stuff, because I was like, this is so boring. I can clearly see what kind of suggestions they're putting in this. It's just like whatever. But then, I also was apprised of media fakery. I did know about a Sandy school. I did know about, some of those things on love, but I didn't make the connection that when there is these synchronizations of media, that is one of the greatest heuristics to point to it being completely staged. No one died, no one cried. And now, like the stuff with, Mind War by Michael Aquino, I'm starting to realize, it's standard operating procedure. It's actually the next step of warfare is total mind war. We're going to enter an age where all our wars will be on our screens and everyone will be taking sides. And I always think of, it's a little hack to refer to, but 1984, when they say we were always at war with East Asia, right? Oceania was always at war with East Asia. Never once is it questioned, whether it be Winston or anyone, never once was that war even occurring. The party just said it was, and everyone agreed. They had their 2 minutes to say, but it's like, how do we know it was even happening?
Right. And one final point about this manifestation theory is they'll say, well, we're manifesting everything. It's like, really? Well, then how come the moon landings are fake? If 8 billion people and billions more, over the course of the years believed in this thing, watched movies about it, were amazed by it, how come it didn't suddenly become real? So there's my counter to, we're collectively manifesting reality through our TV sets. Like, no, actually we're not. We're collectively hallucinating. We're collectively internalizing a false worldview, but it has zero bearing on objective reality. And I realized a lot of the manifestor types, the new age types, would try to steer conversations away from media fakery analysis into, no, reality's fake. Well, if your starting point is that reality's fake, then conversation's over. If reality's fake, then no news is real. All news is fake. Like, you've already conquered the game. You have no place here. If you've transcended to the point where you can say reality is fake, nothing's objective. And that's where I see people go. I think it's a dead end. It's nihilistic. And I think it was planted there. So those of us who are reaching objectivity will instead take the plunge into total solipsism and subjectivity.
Yeah, and it's like the MSM conspiracy of the Mandela effect. That's like the most basic mainstream conspiracy theory, and you are right on the money to say it's essentially cognitive sabotage. And then the MSM plus, like the next level of Mandela effect, is essentially we live in a simulation. All these things, coincidences you're seeing on your screen with other things you're seeing on your screen. It's because the screen is your reality, right? Like the reality is just that, and it is cognitive sabotage for both. So you have the MSM cognitive sabotage, the Mandela effect. You go, if you're a little bit more thoughtful and stuff, then you're in a simulation theorist. And
Yes.
yeah, it's the smoke test that I use is kind of what you said. Like, what is the functional implication of this position that I hold? And it's like I began to realize, like, even if the Mandela effect was real, how do I use this information? What, do I get afraid every time I see the Fruit of the Loom logo on my underwear? And maybe we actually do live in a simulation. What do I do with this information, right? Same thing with chemtrails, right? Maybe they really are spraying the sky, and also, what do I do? Now do I get scared when I look at the clouds? Like, what does these doctrines, how does it affect you?
Right. That's an interesting question. Why is it relevant? But the chemtrail one is interesting to me because there isn't any such thing, but it was really just a misinterpretation that became a thing of itself. But I always wondered about this thing. I was like, why is it that this is a standard thing? And it's bifurcated. It's safe to say, and it shouldn't be, but people are programmed that the only people who believe in chemtrails are right-wing or conspiracy theorists who are not on the left. Because if they're on the left, they're all about climate change. And I see these boxes people put themselves in. And it's like, can't you see that you're in a pro or the anti position, and both of these are controlled? And for the most part, people can't.
Well, because they self-quarantine into their little sphere, and then when they're in their recommendation system box, the only versions of their opposition they see are hyper-caricatured, usually other actors from the other side, presenting the most insane position, never the counterpoint to the one that they hold. And I've been saying forever that recommendation systems are like death by 1,000 cuts, like death by 1,000 recommendations. The For You page on TikTok, the related videos, the front page of YouTube, machine learning algorithms have so much data access to, they've effectively put us all in our own echo chamber. What we subscribe to, what we watch is all that's recommended, but mixed in with it is the little drops of arsenic of the world stage events that everyone must be synchronized on. I mean, before my YouTube channel was banned, I deliberately blocked like Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, Microsoft, NBC. I deliberately blocked. I was like, I don't want to see any of that crap. And yet, if I would leave my computer alone for a bit and autoplay would go on, it would then bring up, did you like one of their videos would play talking about the latest thing everyone needs to hear about. So it's like a feed. Even the term feed is grotesque. Like, what are we, a bunch of farm animals? So we go to our feed, get a bunch of content we like, whether it be video game let's plays or comedy stand-up routines or this show even, right? And then interspliced with it will be the next thing, the next thing everyone needs to care about.
Yeah, the feed makes me think of a Matrix feeding tube with that white protein shake that it injects into the little pod, while they're in their sim. Like the feed, like they're just dumping it in, but it is actually like that. It's a glut of information, and there's so much that they can't possibly masticate it all, so it comes pre-chewed. So they're having this pre-chewed slop fed to them in a steady diet, and all they do is like, oh no, I'm a critic. I take my feed from this guy, and you just take your feed from that guy, so you're non-skeptical. It's like, no, if you're taking a feed, you're not a skeptic. You're a passive recipient of information. And what I point out here is that the rejection of the information until it can be parsed, like the chewing, the mastication of it, that is active. So you can't say that you're an active news consumer if you're alt media. You're passive, just as passive as the blue pillars. Different colored pill, same mode of receiving information. And what I'm advocating here is simply a philosophical change as far as, epistemology, how you process information. And instead of processing media as objective and truthful and just absorb it passively as much as you can, I'm saying, no, reject it and recognize it for what it is. The screen is not a window to the world. It's a filter and always has been.
Yeah, and it's so bizarre to me that when we discuss fakeability and make evidences from the perspective of epistemology, circumstantial evidence, in court, that holds up even more than physical evidence. You know that? It's very easy to plant physical evidence at a crime scene to falsely incriminate someone. You can plant evidence. But things like alibis, motive, those are usually the things that seal or seal someone's fate in a court case. So yeah, it's like, I don't have 4K drone footage of the stage closed set they had in Butler, Pennsylvania, but I don't need it. Like, absence of evidence is not evidence. And that was kind of a point of contention I had with my discussion with JLB. It seemed very bizarre. It was like, for him, absence of evidence was evidence. And, I think that was the point of your blog post today. It's like, no, I'm not confused. I'm just seeing a very, very consistent pattern in our narcissistic media machine that, it's perfectly fine to say that it was fake, even if I don't have, 4K drone footage of it being faked.
Yeah, like you could catch somebody in a lie and discern a lie, even if you don't know the truth of what's behind the lie. And I don't have to have the truth in order to operate under the presumption that you're lying to me. I just need to determine the lie. I can figure out what's behind it later. But they're like, no, you can't call it a lie until you can figure out what's behind it, until you can fully explain it. I'm like, no, that burden of proof isn't actually mine. All I have to do is raise reasonable doubt, which we consistently do.
Yeah, and I think earlier you mentioned how the pre-programming or this concurrent programming is to make people prepared to react rather than think. And the audacity of this friend I mentioned, he called me a reactionary for saying that 713 was a stage event and not a deep state psyop or something like that. And I was like, it's ironic. It's like, you're actually the one who's having a hyper reaction to me pointing out lies. Now, may not have the exact answer of who directed it, who wrote the scripts, and all that stuff, but I can tell with the things you pointed out. Doug Mills being a repeated photographer, the optics of the fight photograph with the Iwo Jima parallels and the Braveheart parallels. You can, right? It's like these things don't happen in an organic rally, in an organic event. And to simply pointing that out and saying these are lies, like this is a lie, it doesn't require a whole explanation, nor is it a conspiracy theory. On reaction, right? He was saying, I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm like, no, dude, I'm just looking at media and going, yeah, this is fakeable.
Well, another thing too is we have a sense of continuity. We've been following this for some time. And if you consider Trump's role in the January 6th hoax, and he has to be implicated, I can demonstrate this, even with his relationship with Ashley Babbitt's mom, Trump is either a total fool, a moron, and a dupe, or he's in the know. Take your pick. But his involvement in January 6th as a stooge, complicit, as an active agent in this honeypot means that he was not a threat to any system or deep state. That's all a hoax. So why would he be targeted for assassination by the deep state? Because he's already part of them. But if you recognize that he's a part of that hoax, then he's a part of every hoax. That these are not separate from him. Like, it's not like he's a rogue businessman fighting the deep state and they got to take him out. That's all World Wrestling Entertainment fantasy. It's fan fiction. But like, I'm not trying to wake people up if they're in the political horseshoe. What I want to do is aggregate those who figured it out and get every single one of us into this third branch of media, and we can study the spectacle together. Those who are participating in it may never step out of it. They will live in that cult for the rest of their lives. I mean, it depends, but I don't have any sort of agenda to try to quote wake people up, but it's interesting to try just to see how they react.
Yeah, and it's again this contact of mine. I just asked him to be consistent because he is how do I put this plainly? A revisionist. I hope you understand what I mean by that. Historical revisionist for certain events that occurred involving a world war.
Okay, he's MSM plus. So the
exactly.
Okay, so the Hitler fan club have a vested interest in everything being real. Like they're like, Israel did 9/11. No, 9/11 was a hoax. Well, then I can't hate Israel. You see how that works? They need they need a scapegoat, and if you take that away, it just takes away everything that they're like their grievances. Like white genocide's a hoax. Like, no, don't tell me that. I want to believe in it, because if you tell me it's a hoax, then I'm mad at these people for no reason. So yeah, exactly. The guys in the MSM box, you're not going to get them out.
And it's sad because it's like, for him identifying propaganda so well, how can he not see the propaganda targeted towards him? I always noticed this with the Lucky Larry Silverstein bit where he said, "Oh, we got to pull it." I'm like, that's from a documentary. I'm like, that's from the script, right? I was like, that was televised. And even the footage of one witness talking about the dancing Israelis, right? That was on the news. I saw the clip. It's like, one woman saw these 5. And she's like, yeah, I was standing over here and I saw these 5 dancing Israelis. I'm like, that's on the news. I was like, you're using the same news apparatus.
There are two groups
to prove that perspective.
Yeah, there's 2 groups you cannot wake up. Normies, maybe, but like alt media, if they're seeing through fakery, but the 2 you can't wake up the woke. That's the thing, is the woke are the most deeply programmed. You can't reach the wokes on the left because they're married to big government and attached to their critical race theory and their anti-white male thing. You can't wake up the alternative or the right-wing woke because they're married to their central thesis that Jews control the world, and they're being victimized and they're being turned into, or they're being genocided, and their women are being turned into tax slaves, and their families are being broken up. Like, no, you can't wake up the woke, whether it's right-wing woke or left-wing woke. You can only reach, in my opinion, you can only reach those who are skeptical of mainstream, but not drinking the Kool-Aid at Jonestown, Alex Jonestown. So there's only a segment, but yeah. Your friend's right-wing woke.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and it's such an undeniable, like, basically they turn into anecdotes, like, well, I saw this that confirms this, and they not knowing that their real life experiences that affirm a hoax, that doesn't make the hoax real. So, for example, like with the 713, the female Secret Service agents acting incompetent, clearly unqualified for the job. He's like, well, I've seen this and this and this. I'm like, yeah, that still doesn't make it real. In fact, I'd argue the fact that it was decorated in that way makes it more of a staged event.
Oh yeah,
they deliberately decorate these events with things people already believe in.
In my immediate reaction on 713, I said, watch, the incompetent Secret Service women will be pointed out, as the right wingers will say, as DEI got Trump killed or almost got him killed. I called that out before they used that as a standard talking point. So that means, again, it's a narrative to get people debating over the cause of the event rather than questioning why it even happened or if it even happened.
Right. So who's responsible? What could have been done? What are the effects? Not did it even happen? That never enters their frame of reference. And yeah, I hope, if anything, if I'm going to talk about last thing, because I know you've been going on for so long, if I ever have any predictions, I think there's going to be a fake controlled demolition of the world stage where the dinosaur media, the MSM, MSNBC, Microsoft NBC, CNN, Fox News, they're all going to, crash out. Everyone will see past the illusion, and the new illusion will be your favorite YouTuber or your favorite talking head, right? That are promoted. Your favorite influencer. That will become the new MSM. Will be your favorite TikToker or streamer or YouTuber. Because for all intents and purposes, no people in their 20s or younger watches the dinosaur media. Never. They never do. But they do have influencers who are just as much on the world stage. Like everyone talks about Tucker Carlson, all stuff. Nobody talks about Mr. Beast, right? No one talks about Penguin Zero or Critical or these other, your Stu Peters, your Laura Loomers. You're the only one I've seen identify that these figures could also be on the world stage. No one ever touches them because they're more organic, right? I follow them on Twitter. I commented on their last video. They know me.
Oh, people,
right?
they fall.
It's even more dangerous.
They fall for the fake grassroots. It's a clever thing. Like, these people are real, they're organic. No, they're not. When I started this channel, this guy Baked Alaska was this alt-right person walking around. And I remember we trolled his YouTube channel, and I got him to shout out Infinite Plane Society. Now, interestingly enough, he was pointed out to me by somebody I suspected of being some kind of an operative. And I thought that was interesting because he had pointed out a number of figures that we had kind of targeted with our trolling. Well, Baked Alaska is the one on January 6th who was coughing COVID on Nancy Pelosi's phone. So he was like a central figure in that story. And if you look at the arc of this character, who he's associated with, who he knows, it's a who's who of agents and operatives planted at the grassroots 8 years before 2020 so that they could essentially execute that and make it look like they were grassroots. So yeah, there's a lot of AstroTurf, fake grassroots out there, and it convinces people they can't see the wolves in sheep's clothing.
Well, hey man, you're talking about the guy who authored the book on meme magic. So he's real, man. He's real. I followed him. So I never did. I'm joking, of course. But it's so, that's what I'm saying is the media criticism people have. We really need to also be forward thinking about it also applying to these world stage characters that have X's, Twitters, YouTube channels and stuff, because I think that's going to be the next step, because no one, even older people these days, are getting into Instagram reels and stuff. Like, people are just, the TV channels are totally dead. If anything, their clips are only replayed on these, like, kind of like a zombie forced out into the public consciousness. Like you said, force memed, right? So all the people who are media advocates that these events really occurred, they're force memeing these events.
Yeah, that's true. And I don't watch TV. I really don't have the time to sit around. But a couple of years ago, I had an extended stay at this motel, and I kept CNN on the whole time. And I was watching it, knowing what I know about how media works. And I was just saying, okay, what is being put out there that they are experiencing? And I noticed things right away. For example, they had this show on about neo-Nazis and a night of hate. And I remember thinking, okay, so there's Nazis out there rioting, and I just looking on the news, looking for trending topics on Twitter. Is this really happening? And I realized anybody watching CNN is going to think that it's Nazi night. Well, it turns out that was like a 6-month-old documentary, but it wasn't framed that way when they played it. So the more I'm watching, the more I'm seeing the headlines, the stories are definitely agenda driven. For example, the constant refrain of another train derailment, another one because of Trump's deregulation. So they were building off of the whole East Palestine disaster, and it's very repetitive. And then I started picking up other subtle things. Like, for example, there was a commercial with Jamie Foxx in it for glasses with an owl in it. And then they talked about him right after. Jamie Foxx, 55, dies on set, but then they resurrect him, or he had this near-death experience. And then, so I'm noting, okay, Jamie Foxx now seems relevant on the world stage. Like, he's been kind of force memed out there. Well, a couple weeks later, he's in the news, TMZ, because they say he's been cloned. And then right after this, a movie comes out called They Cloned Tyrone. And guess who's in it? Jamie Foxx.
Jamie Foxx.
So I was just realizing, okay, so they built up a lot of buzz for a movie after this story emerged that he might have been cloned, and a viral story because a picture of him looked different. But he wouldn't have been in my frame of reference if he wasn't thrown onto a whole lot of commercials. And then they made this story about him. Now, this is not disconnected from a number of psyops at the time, because Jamie Foxx is very relevant to the conversation of police brutality, BLM. He was there with Trayvon Martin, hyping that up. He was in a relevant movie called Django Unchained. But if you follow the character arc of Jamie Foxx on the world stage, it made sense that he was being showcased at that time. And it was all, I think, part of reiterating the certain story about Tyree Nichols, which was another Rodney King-like event. I mean, this is kind of a side note, but I'm just saying, watching CNN, I can see this force memeing effect where they can get any theme, any story, any actor or character just to dominate the zeitgeist of the day. The dominant memes of the day are fully under their control, and they have a captive audience for it.
Completely. And yeah, the actor persona stuff, and what I love so much about the IPS think tank, it's not just like, oh, look, this is fake. It's like we look at the big, large scale narratives that are being played out concurrently for both sides. And we do it with specificity, with detail, identifying actor personas, Meta-script directors. And hey, Ari Aster is coming out with, was it Eddington this summer? I'm definitely going to see that because I actually like Hereditary, and I didn't like Midsummer, but like, yeah, his movies. This summer movie, Eddington, is about radicalized COVID conspiracy theorists.
Oh,
It's starring Joaquin Phoenix.
Oh, that's
starring
good. Okay.
Joaquin Phoenix.
The Joker's in it, so you have to consider all of his other
Yeah.
propaganda roles when they put these things out.
Yeah, and Midsummer was like a very subtle white supremacist horror film about like the fear of white supremacy, where they go to this like, you know, pagan Norse thing, kind of a modern day Wicker Man, but purely white people, scary swastikas, right? So I'll certainly be interested in that watch, but yeah, it definitely goes through. And the tagline for Eddington is "Hindsight is 2020."
Oh, that's good. That's good. I'll
Like,
check that one
the year
out.
2020.
You know, so
But yeah,
I'm-
anyway, thanks for.
Yeah. And you reminded me of one because I'm thinking through these things and concurrent programming. I watched this show called Ruby Ridge because it's trending. And what happens the next day? Tyreek Hill gets treated roughly by some cops, and it shows up on TV. He's on his way to a Miami Dolphins game. He's a player. So I'm like, wait, Tyreek Hill gets the police brutality treatment just as Ruby Ridge is on Netflix. And the opening scene of Ruby Ridge was exactly what happened to Tyreek Hill. And when the Tyreek Hill thing happened, a lot of commentary was, wow, you have to watch this Netflix movie. And so their thinking is this
It's
is
like a.
yeah, it's like life imitates art, or this is the art's reflecting the zeitgeist. Watch this movie to be informed about what happened to Tyreek Hill. And I'm like, wow, they're just lining up for their own programming.
commercials for Netflix shows in the supposedly real news. And yeah, like you mentioned, the media themselves even drew parallels to that, but it's just an eerie coincidence, right? It's kind of like, you know, Elon Musk saying it looks fake, right? But it's not. So whenever there's a news event that points out the stuff we point out and go, wow, what an eerie coincidence, but it's a coincidence.
Well, yeah, exactly.
It never
This is a coincidence.
manifests or gets bigger.
So what is the explanation for this though? Rebel Ridge comes out, and it's about racist police departments, systemic racism, and this guy fights the power. And then Tyreek Hill, a super rich, popular football player with a very expensive, nice car, and no matter how well he's done, he's still treated terribly by the cops. And that's this parallel messaging. So then what we're seeing here is that there's a coordination between the psyop of this player being pulled over publicly and treated that way and the release of the Netflix film. So it's not simple. I mean, it's not complicated to see how they orchestrate these things. And so my explanation here is Tyreek Hill took part in a psyop. I think that makes a lot more sense than the universe inspired these Netflix writers to make this really terrible series. And it's going to coincidentally coincide with some football player going through something similar. I mean, the explanation for this is quite simple. And I think we're arriving at that here. And I'm hoping that more people who used to fall for the mystification of these events can start to see clearly what we're pointing out.
Yeah, and the great nephew of Edward Bernays was the co-founder and first CEO of Netflix. You should ask the Synchromystics that when Edward Bernays staged photo ops with actresses pretending to be feminist protesters smoking cigarettes, and it was a news story that they were smoking cigarettes to stimulate the sales of cigarettes in women and remove the stigma. Ask them if that was the universe that prompted Edward Bernays with that idea, or if it was the funders.
Great point. And I'm glad you brought this up, because we can kind of talk about propaganda in the same way we talk about advertising. And we're talking about advertising ideas and events and narratives and even personages. So there's a lot of overlap between propaganda and advertising. It's really just context. And it's almost a distinction without a difference. But thank you very much for the call, by the way. We've covered a lot of ground in the last 45 minutes.
For sure. And we'll be in touch. But so thanks. Bye.
Yeah, and again, thanks for helping me test out the new phone system. Have a great night. All right, everyone. That is Leo Pirate, mindwar.page. So tonight was big because we had to test out the new system. And the new system is going to work just fine. I'll be even more fluent with it tomorrow. There's quite a lot that I can use here that I don't have available with OBS. So this is going to be great. We've been talking about space fakery, concurrent programming, media manipulation. These things are all integrated. If you're at the point where you're willing to accept that Kate Perry faked going to space, everything else we're talking about here shouldn't be a challenge at all. There's no separate entity faking space and faking terror and faking history. It's all monolithic and uniform, coming from the same place. We've talked about the fact that we live in Black Ops 2, and a lot of people are noticing. Russia is about to bomb us from space with nukes. Here's a quote from Tenet. It's the bomb that didn't go off. The danger, no one knew what was real. That's the bomb with the real power to change the world. This is, again, Christopher Nolan, Jonathan Nolan. They're always involved in these movies that have significant elements as far as the world stage stories. And in this case, it's an enigmatic quote about a bomb that didn't go off, but had the real power to change the world. And in the context of Oppenheimer and Fallout and all their other movies that have relevance to fake events, I think that might be something of a statement about the fake nuke, and how the fake nuke, when it became real, it reframed geopolitics. It changed the world, and it put everybody at the mercy of various world dictators and at the mercy of their own leaders to keep them safe. It put us into the end times. Like, I don't believe we are in the end times. I'm not a religious cultist. If you're a mainstream believer, you must therefore believe we are in the end times. Whether it's planet killer asteroids, nukes, or climate change, you might as well not save for the future, because it's all going to end. I'm not an end times believer. Here's a quote from Orwell. Erase a people's past and you control their future. Well, they do this. They erase our past, but they do so by inundating our news with fake news and covering up whatever is really happening and superimposing a false paradigm over it. So they may not be technically erasing our past, but in a sense that they're making up and confabulating the now that becomes the past. It's tantamount to the same thing. And they do, in fact, control the future. As a species, we have been conquered. We live in the Matrix. We live in the Truman Show unless you step out of it. And it's not something you step out of physically. You have to mentally exit the Matrix. Going into a bunker physically isn't going to save you. Anyway, thank you all for the calls and the comments. We'll continue this conversation soon. Go to ips.monster, subscribe to make sure you get the archives. And the upcoming archives that I upload do have infographics and transcript summaries, courtesy of Perplexity AI ChatGPT, and Claude. So you don't want to miss it. Have a great evening.